Naruto had both his legs hooked around a tree branch, hanging outside down. He had his eyes closed, seemingly focused and ignorant to the world around him. The bliss and calmness of meditation. Sasuke could never chill like that, not with the raging thoughts that wreaked havoc within his mind. Though he'd admit it to anyone, he was envious of how Naruto could be calm at times. It wasn't that the blonde didn't have his own demons tormenting him from within. But despite it all, he was normal. Infuriatingly, the blonde used this to gloat that he was a more mature and controlled compared to him. It irked him at times. He disliked it when Naruto lorded his superior emotional intelligence over him. Sasuke glanced at Sakura. She sat under the same tree, reading a book. Most likely a romantic story. She should be reading useful things, like ninjutsu, but there she was, reading useless things and then depended on her teammates to save her life. How she was even in their team mystified him at times. As smart as he was dumb to the question of what kind of balance she brought to the team. Kakashi was sitting on the tree behind them. He had his back pressed against the trunk of tree, a curious mood around him. In all truth, Sasuke was bored. Frustratingly so. This break was long. Whenever they were done with their missions, their pace in returning home was always tortoise. It got to him. There was nothing to do than just talk. And everyone else always had something to do when they took breaks, aside from him. At this rate, he was even going to miss Sakura to sweet-talk his pride. An idea came to him and he did a swift lunge into the air, his body twisting clockwise, while he stretched his right foot. Naruto opened his eyes in a snap when he sensed an attack. Sasuke was in front of him in midair, twisting. Naruto immediately crossed both his hands across his face, predicating a kick from the Uchiha. Sasuke did indeed attempt to kick him with his right foot, on his face. The kick slammed into his defense. It managed to hold on, but the force made him lose his grip on the tree branch, and he was pushed backward. Once he let go of the tree, Naruto flipped twice, trying to balance himself to land graciously. "What the hell, Tem?" Naruto shouted before he could even land on the weedless ground. He sent a glare toward his teammate, standing a couple of feet away from him. Sasuke shrugged his right shoulder carelessly. "You were wide open. Doesn't give you the right to attack me like that. You know how hard it was to finally close out all the voices. You shouldn't grow too comfortable. We are not yet home." Naruto was a little incensed that Sasuke was being nonchalant about this whole thing. But meditating was a difficult process for him, especially when he had to shut out the damn nine-tailed Biju within him. It took joy in tormenting him with whispers of hatred and so forth. He still had to shut out the horrors of Orochimaru's bone-chilling laughter. The many fears he had about being captured by that snake and stripped onto a table while Kabuto poked his body with needles and scissors. It took much inner prowess to climb those barriers for Sasuke pull him out simply because he was bored. "You could have just asked." "Well, there is no fun in that." Sasuke smirked. "You're taking competition way too far, Tem. If you're bored, take a nap." Sakura released a tired sigh, shutting her book. She glanced between her teammates. Naruto was still glaring at Sasuke. The whisker marks seemed to sharpen whenever he was angry. Gone was the orange, replaced by a crimson long-sleeved t-shirt, short dark blue pants and shinobi boots of the same color. A pouch was tied around his right thigh. Sasuke wore his usual blue and white. For some reason, he seemed to enjoy making Naruto angry. They usually argued, sometimes, over who was the better shinobi. It was all good-natured, most of the time. She glanced at their sensei. He was sitting pretty, giggling perversely while he read his book. It was like he was ignorant that his students were going to end up in blows once more. It was harmless, but the two lacked timing. They would even start it in front of the Sandaime Hokage. She shook her head. "Be nice you two. Naruto, you don't have to get angry," she lectured, shooting a threatening glare at Naruto. Sasuke would just toss that look to the side and ignore her. But Naruto's response caught her a little off guard. Not because of how harsh it was. He was at times stone cold in his treatment when she did something stupid. What caught her off guard was the delicious word he used, boyfriend. "Tell your boyfriend to stop attacking me whenever he sees an opportunity. I know his mighty pride was wounded after I won, but he needs to get over it." Sakura only heard, "boyfriend." She blushed deeply, trying not to steal a glance at Sasuke, but she did it anyway. The Uchiha looked stone-faced. Any thought she was having was quickly crushed, and the look on his eyes stabbed her on the chest. Her deep shade was quickly replaced by anger. Perhaps trying to reflect Sasuke's thoughts. Or maybe anger that he seemed indifferent to the brought of being her boyfriend. Either way, she could only look at Naruto. "Stop teasing Sasuke like that," she yelled at Naruto. The blonde blinked, while staring at her. He grinned and then burst out in a loud annoying laugh that echoed through the trees, causing even the resting birds to flee. He was laughing, pointing a finger at her. It caused all sorts of emotions to twitch within her. This sight was a little familiar and the reasons usually varied. "You were actually thinking about Sasuke being your boyfriend, weren't you?" He laughed once more, settling on his butt. Sakura grew angry. That kind laugh she'd heard before. It frustrated her. It crushed any dreams she had with Sasuke. "Just you watch, Naruto. Sasuke will belong to me one day," she wanted to say, but she bit her lip. "I wasn't." Naruto's eyes flashed. The blue seemed to radiate with mischief as he held out both his hands. "Of course not. You'd never have such thoughts. You don't love Sasuke after all." Those baiting words, Naruto said them in a slow and purposeful tone before turning to Sasuke. "Hear that, Tem? Sakura doesn't love you. She does not love you. He's lying, Sasuke." Sakura halted, slapping both her hands across her mouth to stop herself from saying what she nearly uttered. Once more, Naruto's laughter disturbed the peace, making her red. In anger, she hurled her book toward him. If he was closer, she'd just punched him on his gut. If he didn't decide to dodge anyway. Seeing the incoming book, Naruto waved his right hand and caught it. Before he could pass off another comment, he sensed movement from behind. Kakashi landed soundlessly behind him, still holding his book. "All right, you have rested enough, let's move," the Jonin announced, lone eye still staring at the pages of his book. Just when it was getting fun, Naruto mumbled, getting up. He looked around for his bag and then walked over to get it. He smiled, handing Sakura her book. She girl just snatched it from him. Naruto shook his head, placed his hands inside his pockets and looked ahead. They were within the Fire Country, returning from another C-class mission. He considered them mightily easy these days. But Sakura would never agree with his assessment. And for Kakashi, it would just be, meh. The Jonin could look indifferent to any situation. Though, it was not as it looked. The only one who had his back was the brooding bastard who was now in the lead. Kakashi glanced at Naruto who was walking by his right side and then his eyes fell on the back of Sasuke. Sometimes, you'd think this team was dysfunctional. Naruto and Sakura could be like water and oil at times. Then again with her disappointing attitude, she was at times at odds with the boy she was evidently obsessed with. It reminded him of Obito, but the dynamics were different in this team. But the Uchiha was still the jealous type. And unlike Obito, Sasuke had deep hatred that at times scared him. Naruto was the only other person who seemed to be able to handle it. Unsurprisingly, Naruto's whole life couldn't be defined without hatred taking a large chunk of the explanation. A lonely life that has found some tonic in this team life. At least, he thought that way. "Can we not request another mission when we get home?" Naruto asked, staring at Sasuke's back. "Did Sasuke-kun hit you hard?" Sakura asked, apparently genuinely worried for him. She was mocking him, he knew. Naruto had to hold himself from laughing. She had these eyes of concern. It would be something if she wasn't mocking his thirst for missions. He'd never rejected any, as long as they were not those damn chores they called D-rank missions. But he wasn't the only one, was he? Of course, the devoted Sakura would never put him in the same bracket as her future husband. "Am I that bad?" Sakura stared at him, unblinking. "You'd remove bandages and flee the hospital if we were going out on a mission without you. Even if you had clutches, you'd stumble all the way into a mission." "I always flee the hospital," Naruto shrugged. "My point exactly, but I'm considerate to my condition." He paused, digesting things over. "You speak facts." Kakashi wanted to flip a page, but Naruto's request was strange. Naruto abstaining from a mission was the same as an Akamichi rejecting roasted meat, dipped in hot sauces. He closed his book, with much protest from his love for the seduction Jiraiya always wrote. He then pocketed the book and glanced at Sasuke. He didn't seem to have any interest, but he could see the Uchiha had both ears working overtime, so not to miss anything. After all, the first thing he was willing to openly agree on with Naruto was the demand for a better mission. Sasuke had his reasons. Naruto had his reasons. Both wanted to be stronger, for different ambitions. Sasuke was walking toward the path of hatred while Naruto was trying to conquer the hate that has threatened to drown his very existence since the day he was born. At least for the blonde, he could assume that much. Nobody in this village could claim to know what Naruto was thinking. Not even the best intelligence collectors could observe Naruto and form a conclusive report on his thoughts based on his behavior. He wasn't predictable. Sometimes, it appeared to be by design. Why? Naruto looked up. The sun was out in full force, just above their heads. But the shades of the leaves at times stood between it and them. After a moment, he shook his head, clearing his thoughts and looked ahead. Ever since the wave mission, we've done a handful of missions. Each time we seem to face stronger opponents. I have long realized that the shinobi world is not all fun and throwing cool jutsu around as we thought. We need to constantly reflect and improve ourselves. The only person who seemed to still live within a bright world augmented by delusions was Sakura. Even till this day, she didn't appear to take things seriously. Then again, why did she have to worry about pulling her weight when her beloved Sasuke was always at her corner to defend her? Their sensei exacerbated the issue by not voicing his displeasure over her progress as a kunoichi. But who was he to judge? She'd probably tell him off if he tried. Best to just put his hands inside his pockets and keep his mouth shut. Continuing, Naruto added, I realize that anything can happen. We saw deaths in our first mission. We haven't been forced into that path, but eventually we will. I want to take some time to improve. Each mission always shows you where you lack. Kakashi I smiled. He didn't need to even confirm with Sasuke if he agreed with his teammate. Naruto made sense. Perhaps better than the rest of his teammates, he understood that one day, it was going to be kill or be killed. He didn't wish for them to live this kind of life. But the more they were exposed to dangerous missions, the more they saw the ugly truth of the shinobi world. I'll speak to the Sandaime Hokage when we arrive. The Jonin replied and turned his eyes to the back of Sasuke. But did not address the Uchiha. You should also take the time to train as well, Sakura. But if you need any help, I'll be around to help. Naruto rolled his eyes, knowing full well the moment they got home Sakura was going to take a long bubble bath and then spend the rest of her time colluding with her sinister personality of ways to seduce Sasuke. The rest of the journey was quiet and peaceful. By the time they reached the hidden leaf, the sun was already starting to color the sky a bit bloody. The large gates welcomed them. Looking at them, Naruto wondered just how much effort it took for anyone to build them. Then again, with Mokuden and how proficient the Shodai Hokage was with it, it would not be surprising if even putting up the walls didn't make him break a sweat. He glanced outside and each time he returned to the village, he felt a little bit of relief. The outside world was brutal, merciless and unforgiving. Konoha was hell, but it was the lesser evil. He could block out the stares and laugh with the few he knew. But outside, it was a life of the haunted. Danger always lurked at every shade. You never knew if your meal would be your last before those who pursued you finally caught up to you. The Eternal Guards marked their registers as Kakashi addressed them. Another return from a successful mission. A few complaints that they remained stuck being Chunin and on this duty while the kids showed progress to surpass them soon enough. Go rest. I'll report to the Sandaime Hokage. We will meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. to discuss how we go for the next couple of days. At least be on time tomorrow. Kakashi merely smiled and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. I really need to learn how to do that. Probably too much for you to understand. Naruto turned his eyes toward the raven-haired Uchiha. His voice was so cold that a person unfamiliar with it would find it bone-chilling. HMPH, says the bastard who stole my moves. Naruto took joy in seeing Sasuke's face twist. But after a moment, he settled. Yours was sloppy. I perfected it, my move nevertheless. Naruto waved his right hand, dismissively. I'll see you tomorrow. Gotta go home and rest. And then go for ramen later on. Why don't we all go for something to eat? Naruto raised an eyebrow. They did still need to collect their pay for this mission. But Sakura didn't have to worry about that. She had parents. They would be standing at the door, ready to welcome her back home. But both he and Sasuke were alone. They had no one. Yet, neither of them made such a fuss about keeping the team together and doing more things together. Sasuke did not grace this with response, he just walked away, like the lone wolf he was. Naruto sighed. A couple of months ago, or maybe weeks, he would be offering to go with her, even when knowing she'd reject him and then put a knife through his heart. He'd do it, just to puff her up a bit. But he was no macho. And so, he smiled, and then waved his right hand, leaving the girl alone. Instead of walking through the streets, Naruto jumped into the rooftops. For a moment, he stared at the Hokage monument. A mask of indifference settled for a couple of seconds before being replaced by a smile. He had to endure this. After jumping around, Naruto finally arrived home. His damned apartment. The place he has lived since the orphanage became so toxic even the Sandaime thought it best he live alone, even when he couldn't even take care of himself. Even a sadist like Orochimaru would have found it too difficult for a child to live there. Pulling out his key from his pouch, Naruto stuffed it inside the keyhole and unlocked the door. He stepped in and then shut it behind him. He removed his boots right at the welcome mat. Loneliness welcomed him, the cold den that often made him miserable when he reminded himself that others were probably laughing and maybe even arguing with their parents. He didn't have that, he never had it to begin with. It was nonetheless much better than being stripped onto a bed, with needles poking over his body. That torment was both physical and emotional. At least, he had now learned to live with the bitter loneliness. Kyuubi brat, huh? Naruto smiled sadly as he walked away from the door. He shook his head, walking over to his bedroom. He threw himself onto his bed, and faced the ceiling, both hands stretched out. He smiled. Things would change. He would change them. He was going to conquer this. He was Naruto Uzumaki after all. And even with the curses and bad fortune it brought, he was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. And he took pride in it. It was his badge of honor. He couldn't run from it. When you have failed in your futile attempts to win them over, come to me and I will take over your body, show these village true hatred. Naruto shut off this discouraging voice. Nothing would keep him from his dreams. Not even a mountain-sized biju that honestly frightened the nerves out of him. But the Kyuubi was wrong about something. Did Naruto care to win over the village? The wealthy question. Naruto was just never going to correct it or anyone who presumed to know his motives. It was fine that way. It was much easier for people to ruin you when they knew the roadmap. Hiruzen looked up from the stack of papers on his desk, glancing at Kakashi. He wearily smiled as the Jonin moved closer to his desk before dropping a scroll. Back so soon. We managed to do this one a bit quickly. Hiruzen nodded and then leaned back on his chair. He glanced at the scroll Kakashi placed and then back at the Jonin. Anything I should know? He was supposed to read the mission report but there was much to do. He couldn't always read every little report on this desk. Sasuke's Sharingan has matured farther. In a couple of more months, it may be fully matured if we continue on the same path. One person who'd rejoice on the progress was Danzo. Although out of character, if Danzo suddenly burst into the office with a bottle of alcohol, calling for a celebration, Hiruzen wouldn't be shocked. But more than any, the one person who would jump was Itachi. It was good news. Hiruzen should be happy that Sasuke was becoming an asset to the village. But the Uchiha had issues. He was major red flag, a flight risk. With each day, the danger was more and more clear. He hadn't done anything to make them wary, but his contempt for Itachi and seemingly unquenchable desire to kill his brother was evident with each passing day. There was nevertheless some good news in all this mess. The bonds he was making, especially with Naruto, would maybe persuade him to be grounded. I trust you're paying attention to the situation. I am, Kakashi replied with a nod of his head. The last Uchiha business didn't hold that much value to him. But Sasuke was still an important asset to the village and he had to take care of him, and so was Naruto. Good. And Naruto-kun. 13 long years since the Kyuubi incident and the greatest blunders of his tenure as Hokage. And still, Hiruzen could never quite climb over the bitterness he felt over how things have turned out with Minato's son. If not handled with care, it may have blown up on them and the village would have suffered massively. Likely, it would have given the villagers ammunition and the comfort to say they'd been right all along. Naive. Danzo was right about him. Ideals were good, even at times, to hope was the only thing you could muster. But he had been naive and maybe childish to actually think the villagers would accept Naruto. When had he even seen it? In his dreams maybe. He should have known better, but he wanted to hope. For what exactly, Hiruzen couldn't tell. As a result of his naivety, Naruto has suffered greatly. And try as he might, Hiruzen couldn't repair the damage. He could only swallow his bitterness and hope that he didn't make the same mistakes. Nonetheless, Naruto was strong, both mentally and in the heart. He had his weak days. He was a child after all. So, he too cried. But the fact that he's held on, hopeful and still dreaming just meant he truly was strong. Perhaps more than him, and how he was willing to give him credit. No issues, Kakashi replied with a thoughtful look. His capacity to learn and willingness to admit that others are better give him the edge. He sighed just thinking about Sasuke. He has always been willing to better himself. Indeed, but unlike him, Sasuke's pride gets the better of him. Most Uchiha were prideful, but you're his sensei. I put you there to handle it. Nobody matches the potential of those two in their generation. We could be looking at future Hokage, the Sandaime Hokage said in a stern tone. You need to ensure that they remain close and kill any thought that may not align with that of the village. Hi, Kakashi paused, but I struggle with Sasuke. He doesn't open to anyone. While he sometimes seems to be willing to give everything for the team, there are times the thought of revenge seemed to overtake him. Admittedly, even when he took Sasuke to his wing when teaching him Chidori, they hadn't exactly bonded. The one person who seemed capable of pressing the right buttons with the Uchiha was Naruto. And the blonde was smart about it, at times. There were days Naruto pressed Sasuke just for his amusement. It astonished him just how much Naruto had analyzed his teammates. And him. He hadn't seen the sheet. It was just in the way that Naruto handled both his teammates that made him realize the blonde knew when and how to press them. He is on the right path. It is only true bonds and companionship that will ease his heart. Return later to collect the pay, Hiruzen smiled, thinking about Naruto. But I'm sure Naruto is going to come and demand his before the day ends. Or maybe he was just being hopeful. He always was. And what has that yielded for him till so far? Hiruzen took comfort in that despite many failures, Naruto was still around. Konoha had yet to be knocked off its pole position as the mightiest hidden village. This has come under threat nonetheless. And owing to his ideals. When Kumo had threatened, he'd bowed to the pressure. Danzo may have been right. If they had continued to battle with Iwa, they would have won and dealt a massive blow to it. Yet he quit the war, and now Iwa's strength now made him nervous. He hoped, one day, nobody would take advantage of such choices. To his disappointment, the blonde did not come. The following day, the creeping atmosphere of the Forest of Death no longer bothered Naruto as it did first time around. Even as he sat under a tree, surrounded by dark shadows, the cries of insects, the stench of predators and mournful moans, he could afford to close his eyes and try to meditate. It was of importance for him, especially with the Kyuubi always trying to push its hatred of humans after him. He amused himself by thinking that perhaps if he was able to conquer the hatred of this village, he would also deal with that of the Kyuubi. It would probably do its chilling laugh if it heard him say those words. Naruto's eyes snapped open when he sensed movement. He glanced behind through the corner of his eyes and then sighed. You have a bad timing, Tem. Sasuke stared. Asking Naruto for something was a problem. The words always got stuck on his throat and he usually just resorted to just attacking. These days though, the result was not always pleasant. How did you even know I was here? Kakashi-sensei told me. Sasuke shrugged. I need a training partner. Training alone is different compared to training with someone who exposes weaknesses. Naruto smiled, as he stood up and then faced the Uchiha. Are you acknowledging my greatness, Sasuke? HNN. Naruto shook his head. Then, what do you mean then? I want a training partner. Naruto sighed. Sasuke was not asking but demanding. Arrogant prick. Even when he was asking for help he had that stick up his behind. Naruto sat down. He had time, he could fool around. He knew, it would probably just boil his teammate, but that was the target. It was always a laugh when the Uchiha was all red and blowing steam through his nose and ears. Ask someone, I'm busy. But if you really want to do it with me, ask nicely. Sasuke glared, I can just attack you. Oh, Naruto did hand seals. You think I'd permit you to do that? But if you want to play it like that and refuse to ask, let's do this. He grinned. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. About 100 clones appeared, some standing behind him, some standing on the trees. Basically, they surrounded them. Defeat the clones and you get to spar with me. Sasuke gritted his teeth, seeing the hundreds of clones lunging at him all at once. How was he supposed to even fight them all when they were attacking like that? They were clones, but still copies of the original. Whatever Naruto could do, they could do. He leapt backwards, inhaling oxygen while doing hand seals. Kaden. Great Fireball no Jutsu. Sasuke released intense flames from his mouth. The huge ball of flames charged toward the incoming horde of clones. To give it range, he kept releasing the flames while spinning. However, Before the jutsu could collide with the clones, they all dispersed, creating a huge cloud of smoke screen. He was forced to cancel his jutsu as he couldn't even see Naruto or sense him. Sasuke jumped backwards, trying to escape the trap he'd created for himself. He landed gracefully, but on alert. Naruto touched down behind the Uchiha like a leaf. Even though he made no attempt to attack, Sasuke spun around in a flash, and then leapt away from him. He frowned when landing a couple of feet away. What made him frown was the smirk on Naruto's lips. Only Naruto could use hundreds of clones just to make a smokescreen. And he had once tried to make those damn clones and nearly kicked the bucket. Hell, even Kakashi couldn't even create as much as Naruto with the same ease and nonchalance. And that was even Naruto's greatest asset. You were open, Sasu-chan. I knew you were going to do that, Dobi. You enjoy sparring with me as much as I do. Okay, let's do this. I've been itching to remove that chip off your shoulder anyway. Sasuke scoffed. It isn't like you can do it. Naruto grinned. By that, you admit you got a chip on your shoulder. Damn, Sasuke, I didn't think you'd admit it like that. When the Uchiha only glared at him, Naruto only laughed. Let's do this, he said before disappearing in a blur. Sasuke looked around the trees. Despite the massive chakra amounts that even he envied, Naruto had gotten rather good at hiding. But this was just a revision of their first training session with Kakashi. Hide first before making a move. Yet, with Naruto, it was different. Only on occasions was he the first to strike. He jumped onto a tree, landing on a strong branch and then extended his senses. He smirked, sensing the blonde hiding behind a tree, just behind him. Naruto had his back pressed against the trunk of a tree, standing on a branch while watching Sasuke. When the Uchiha suddenly vanished, his senses went on overdrive as he tried to locate him. Sasuke materialized in midair, facing him with an arrogant smirk. Sasuke didn't give Naruto the chance to even lift his hands to attempt to block an attack. He attacked swiftly, sending his right foot toward his temple. The kick connected, but instead of Naruto being pummeled to the tree, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. A clone. Sasuke tried twisting while still in midair, but he was only welcomed by Naruto's right foot. It slammed into his face. Sasuke cursed at the pain. But it was nothing compared to the throbbing ache he felt when his body slammed into the trunk of the tree. Naruto didn't stop there. He landed on the branch of the tree, and then lunged at Sasuke, who had yet to recover. He raised his knee, hitting the Uchiha across his chest. Grr! Sasuke gritted his teeth, holding himself. Naruto hit hard, always. The knee to the chest made him feel like a brick had been slammed right into his ribcage. He ignored the pain, the momentary loss of the ability to breathe, and took a swung toward Naruto. The blonde saw it and jumped away. Smirking, Sasuke took out a small shuriken and then swiftly hurled it toward the airborne blonde. While airborne, still facing Sasuke, Naruto tried to shift his legs to the sides to avoid the shuriken. It missed him, giving him a second of relief. But then it turned around, wrapping around his right leg around the ankle. He glared at the smirking Sasuke. Sasuke grabbed the thread with both hands and then yanked it back. The sudden pull forced Naruto to change directions and he was sent crashing to the ground on his back. Ouch! Naruto cried as he crashed into the ground on his back, getting buried there. Naruto's eyes widened slightly when Sasuke came crashing toward him. He waited for the right moment to act. He raised his right leg, aiming at the Uchiha's chest when Sasuke got closer to him. Sasuke responded by lifting his right knee. His knee collided with Naruto's foot, suspending him in the air. But he quickly grabbed Naruto's leg as he landed on the ground. Using all his strength, he took a step back, lifting the blonde into the air. He then did a 360-degree twist, before hurling Naruto toward a tree. While airborne, Naruto glanced behind for a second and then toward Sasuke, who was dashing toward him. He flipped twice, forcing his body to the ground. He landed on one knee, skidding backwards under the momentum. The back of his right foot hit a tree as he came to a halt. He stood up, ready to defend himself as Sasuke's right foot stomped to the ground in front of him, his left cleaving through the air for a high kick. Naruto lifted both his hands, only using his left as shield and his right with its palm open. He winced slightly when the kick hit his wrist, but quickly ignored the pain to grab Sasuke's leg. Once he grabbed the leg firmly, he pushed the Uchiha back slightly, just to put him off balance. His right foot swept through the ground, hitting Sasuke's grounded leg. The action caused the Uchiha to fall backwards. While falling on his back, off balance with no way to balance himself, Sasuke quickly folded his hands across his chest the moment Naruto let go off his foot. But the blonde didn't leap into the air. Instead, he flashed below him, and then wrapped his hands around his waist and then dragged them both to the ground. Boom! Sasuke cursed when Naruto slammed him to the ground, head first. Naruto didn't need to channel chakra into his hands. He had enough strength and he could act before Sasuke could recover his bearings. His hands slid from Sasuke, and then pushed the Uchiha into the air. There was enough space between them for him to knee the Uchiha on his back. Sasuke gritted his teeth when the knee collided with his back. He tried getting away from Naruto, but a thread wrapped around him, binding his arms with his body. He glared below, as the blonde pulled him to the ground and then slammed him hard. Arg! Naruto stood up, holding the thread firmly with Sasuke tied up. He smirked. You shouldn't leave your things on me, things like this happen. Sasuke glared at Naruto. To be brought to this level. Disappointing. He couldn't allow Naruto to get the best of him. But he hadn't used the Sharingan yet. Still, that worried him. His arms were still mobile. He quickly clapped them, needing chakra before inhaling chakra amounts of air. Kaden. Fireball no jutsu. It was a small ball of intense flames that spread out toward him. Naruto quickly let go of the thread and leapt backward to avoid the flames. He stood, watching the flames disperse, knowing that Sasuke was still on the ground. After the flames dispersed, he watched Sasuke get up, grinning in an infuriating manner. I entertained you enough. Come back next time when you can win without the Sharingan, he said, waving his hand in a dismissive manner. Sasuke glared at him. That was just the first round. Naruto released a long breath, knowing that Sasuke wasn't going to go away unless he entertained him. Well, it was not like he didn't gain anything from him, and he always did enjoy fighting with Sasuke. You're going to buy me lunch after this. A proud look in the arrogant smirk, Naruto wanted nothing more than to slap Sasuke across his face. But he did not. He just held out his right hand while sitting on the ground. Sasuke took it and then pulled him up. Both their clothes were torn, but there were no deep wounds. They just had to eat, go home and then change before waiting for the meeting with their sensei later on. Naruto dusted himself and then faced Sasuke with an expressionless look. Using genjutsu is cheating. Sasuke shrugged. It is not my fault that you haven't mastered the art of escaping it. It was Naruto's glaring weakness and Sasuke didn't mind taking advantage of it. I ought to get this done. Learn genjutsu at least. Naruto said with a slight shake of his head. I know you just need to disrupt the chakra, but it is still difficult. Especially when he didn't understand much about genjutsu. They were now slowly heading back to the village. It was enough for training today. Your taijutsu has improved. I can't even confidently say I can beat you without using the Sharingan. Naruto stopped walking and stared at Sasuke, a shocked look on his face. Can you repeat that? I'm not sure I heard you correctly. Sasuke didn't bother responding to this. It had been enough that he actually said those words. Still, there was no denying that Naruto was a rival. There was no one else he saw as competition in their age group aside from Naruto. Naruto looked ahead, walking slowly. His relationship with Sasuke was brutal. They understood each other, but there was no mixing of words. The Uchiha told him exactly what he thought of him, and he didn't shy away from telling him that he was an arrogant prick with a superior complex. Yet, as they reached the village streets, the fact that they walked in opposite sides became quite clear. Sasuke was the beloved Uchiha and he was the outcast. The loathsome demon brat. There were days they didn't seem to know how to react to him walking around with Sasuke. Perhaps for some villagers, it was fine, the Sharingan could control the Kyuubi. It was sad, but he had to fight this. To earn his place in this village. Looking ahead, Naruto couldn't help but smile. Sakura and Ino were walking toward them. How he loved this convenient meetings. He glanced at Sasuke. He seemed to want nothing more than to flee. At least, it wasn't like the academy days where fangirls would be chasing after him. How he envied that love and obsession. It was annoying, but Naruto didn't have anyone chasing after him. Not unless it was Anbu or Iruka. Sasuke-kun. Ino waved her hand, her speed increasing. Sakura kept up with Ino and then pushed the girl away from Sasuke when she stopped in front of him. Sasuke was her teammate. He beloved. Were you two training? Sasuke looked to the side, but did stop walking. He was just not going to entertain this. It was pointless. He glanced at Naruto through the corner of his eyes. The blonde openly enjoyed talking and teasing. He did it with either him or Sakura. Neither of them found it amusing. Well, some of us do take the shinobi life seriously, Naruto said carelessly. He then grinned, ignoring the look Sakura was giving him. Besides, I need to get stronger. No weak person becomes Hokage. Sakura rolled her eyes. Keep on dreaming. You are never going to make it. Not with Sasuke with around. Naruto smiled. Sometimes, he didn't stop himself from responding in kind to Sakura's jibes. She deserved at times, even though he did pity her. I have more chances of becoming Hokage than you actually dating Sasuke, he shot back, his tone a little cold. Ino whistled. That's just cold. Naruto shrugged. He wanted to say Sakura irked him at times. My dear, Ino-chan. Sakura is going to take the lead here. You know, she gets to spend time with Sasuke in missions. Did I tell you that he even acts as Prince Charming at times by rescuing her from danger? That foxy grin on Naruto's lips. He was baiting her. Ino glanced at the uninterested Uchiha and then swallowed hard. She had stopped feeling the obsession long ago. But she would never stop acting like she wasn't interested, not when it would give Sakura a free run. Or maybe she still held some interest. She folded her hands across her chest, looking defiant. I highly doubt it. Naruto shook his head. Just the other day, they were doing the night watch. And you know, I don't sleep at all, so, I'm in my tent, and I hear Sakura's voice. He changed his voice, imitating Sakura. No, Sasuke-kun, we are not yet married. Sasuke-kun, don't touch there. Kya, Sakura shouted, her face all red. She lunged at him, trying to punch him. Naruto quickly hid behind Sasuke to avoid getting hit. You were actually thinking about it, weren't you? Sakura faced Sasuke for a moment and then looked away. Why did Naruto have to be like this? He was always trying to make her look like a fool in front of Sasuke. You truly are a pervert. Ino remarked of Naruto. Now, Naruto said, his tone a little serious. He stepped away from Sasuke, walking over to Ino. He stopped in front of her, smiling slyly. But not as much as you, ain't it, my dear Ino-chan? Don't put me in the same bracket as you. Ino puffed her cheeks. We are not in the same bracket. You exist at a higher level. And I admire you for it. Should I call you master? Naruto, Sasuke's cold voice halted any thoughts. If you're going to continue with this, I will go home. Naruto let loose of a long breath. Such a bore, he said. Well, ladies, we will be on our way. He walked past Ino, waved his hand. Where are you going? To eat. We can join you. Naruto and Sasuke exchanged looks and then ran off without responding. Sakura glared at the dust. That was Naruto's fault. The way Sasuke seemed to agree with Naruto and even go along with him bothered her, as she could never get to that level. She shook her head. She just had to do her best. You know they are going to Ikaraku Ramen, right? Sakura blinked. Of course, Naruto probably even had dreams eating ramen. She wouldn't be surprised if his fridge was empty and there was nothing but instant ramen in his cupboards. Let's just go. To their surprise, the two weren't there. It was about an hour before Naruto was supposed to be at the training ground for the team meeting. He didn't immediately head there but went to the Hokage Tower. The third wanted to speak to him. The steps and the passages were all too familiar. Who didn't he know inside the tower? For as long as he has known to walk, Naruto has often found himself drawn to this place. The main reason being that the old man was the only person who'd shown him kindness, aside from the good Samaritans at Ikaraku Ramen who even allowed him to eat for free. The office was usually busy. Even as he stepped in, the third was busy with some people. Naruto minded his business and settled on the couch within the office. He glanced at the frame of the Yondaime Hokage, the greatest Hokage as far as Konoha was concerned. And also the man who sealed the Kyuubi within him. And most recently, as he'd come to find out, the man was his father. It was laughable that he'd heard it from the Kyuubi. The Biju had been taunting him, trying to get him angry. It had told him he was the son of the Minato Namikaze, and yet the village hated him. When he denied this, the Biju had remarked, it would know best since it had been sealed within his mother and had nearly come close to killing both parents. The latter had been said in passing, but Naruto had observed the watchful gaze. The Biju had said it purposefully. A test of some sort. If there was any doubt, that hateful snake had smugly broke the news, simply to watch his face twist in anger. Naruto. He turned to face the third Hokage. The people he'd been speaking with were now gone. Naruto blinked. Had time just flown away while he fought with his thoughts? He stood up and walked over to the Sandame's desk and sat on a chair. The old man was a little hidden under the stack of papers on the desk. It was always work. Even his dream became a reality, he would end up getting drowned in that kind of work. "How are you, Naruto-kun?" Warmly, Naruto responded. "Fine," despite the lies and the secrets. There was no doubt, this was the person who had loved him more than anyone else. "Good good," Hiruzen stared at him. "Kakashi tells me that you still don't use Mokuden." It was not that he didn't want to use it, it was just that there has never been a need to use the extravagant jutsus. He was also still learning. Sakura didn't even know he could do wonders with it. She'd seen him do small things. But if he did big things, she would be forced to accept that he could use the bloodline to the same heights as the Shodai Hokage. She would probably faint when she is forced to accept it. For now, they all treated it as if it was normal. He smiled, amused at the image he painted of her trying to rationalize how he could use it. There were some undeniable psychological issues that he refused to think about even when the Sandame Hokage tried to lead him to it. "It isn't that I don't use it, I only use the minimal efforts. The ridiculous jutsu have not been perfected. When there is a need, I will use them. Besides, it was better to keep his cards to his chest." Mokuden was highly coveted, there was the danger, and for him, it was just double-fold because added to it, he was a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. It doesn't have anything to do with how you came to use it. Hiruzen was careful with the question. He was gentle, so not to trigger anything. Naruto had gone through worse. When the villagers had been busy with him, Orochimaru had found him as a perfect human for his experiments. He was a Jinchuriki with regenerative abilities, and above all, an Uzumaki. For more than a year, Naruto had disappeared and they had searched for him. Had Naruto not exploded in anger with the Kyuubi wreaking havoc in Orochimaru's base, they most likely wouldn't have found him. How Orochimaru got him was still something they couldn't solve. Either way, that Naruto had been angered enough to permit the Kyuubi's chakra to influence him and go after Orochimaru had been a blessing to them. It also provided them evidence that Naruto was indeed being held hostage. There had been some disturbing thought that he had fled from the village to escape the horrors he faced every day. Naruto's lips turned upside down, just thinking about Orochimaru. The loathsome snake that terrorized many yet winning the hearts of many of its followers. Even he had been defiled and cut open by that slithering snake. The Sannin was perhaps the only person who made him bristle with contempt. And he had tried to recruit him saying it was better with him than with the village. Maybe he had considered it. But he could never admit that to anyone. He'd have Anbu watching his every move every day and night because of it. While Konoha was bad, Orochimaru was worse. The outside world was worse. For him, he could never be safe. He would always be hunted for the power in him. If he could not be loyal, he would be killed. He'd done his math. Those who survived the outside world were those with power. The weak got devoured. At this stage, even with Mokuden, Naruto was weak. There would be nights someone could get him while he was asleep. Or when he wasn't expecting it. Konoha provided him safety, and he wasn't going to let it go. No, that does give me a bit of nightmares but it has nothing to do with it. I worried that may be the case. Hiruzen released a sigh of relief. Naruto's life was just tragic. A tragedy that Kushina would not have wanted for her son and would not have stood for. But this was on him as Hokage. Still, things looked better now. There has been days he found Naruto holed up in his apartment, a miserable look on his face. But now, he smiled. He had friends and got along with his team. It made him happy that Naruto was finding that happiness. Yet, a part of him worried that as Sasuke was lonely, the loneliness within Naruto may not be solved that easily. After all, after team sessions, back in his apartment, he was all alone. "I told you about Yamato, right?" Naruto nodded. "If you ever need help with anything, please come to me. I'll arrange for him to help you. It would be good for the village if Naruto used Mokuden in outstanding levels." It was not that his use of it was not already good. Maybe he could even do more than Yamato. The problem was that Naruto was secretive about it. Even at missions, he did the minimal things and used his other skills to get ahead. "When I need the help, I'll ask." He'd never been the one to deny himself that opportunity to grow because he refused to ask help. Maybe then some people would have refused to help or even try to sabotage him, but things were different now. Of course, how Hiruzen wished things were like the old days. There was something different. Ever since Naruto was found in Orochimaru's bases, there seemed to be a line he was not willing to cross, a line he'd crossed on well back then. Maybe there was something Naruto knew. It hadn't been a pleasant talk when it came to the Kyuubi and the fact that he had decided to keep it from Naruto, even lying when asked. But he hoped Naruto would eventually speak to him. The Sandaime opened a drawer and then took out a scroll. He had never even given this to Yamato. But Naruto could do with it. This contains some jutsu used by the Shodai Hokage. I cannot stress its importance to the village. I'm entrusting it with you, Naruto. Accepting the scroll, Naruto beamed. He had begged the third for some scrolls because he wanted to learn by himself, but the old man kept him away from it. I'll take good care of it, Gigi. You're never to take it with you outside the village. If possible, study it within your apartment using Kage Bunshin. Once you have memorized what you need, bring it back, he then smiled. And of course, I'll want to see your progress. That was something he couldn't deny the old man. He grinned, he could offer that much and he was sure the third would be impressed. Training Ground 7. Where were you? Naruto raised an eyebrow, looking at Sakura. She was the captain already. She took note of everyone's time. He wouldn't be surprised if she even had time register. At any environment, she would be rather good. She had excellent chakra control, but hardly a feat worth noting since she had just a tiny bit that was pitiful in his eyes. Aside from taking registers, what good was his teammate for if not obsessing over Sasuke? A waste of talents, but she was still his teammate. If only she wasn't completely irrational when it came to her beloved, then she could be reasoned with. Talking to the Sandaime, Naruto said, pushing past the girl. He laid on his back under a tree, resting his head on his hands while facing up. Sakura settled beside him, stealing a glance. Her relationship with Naruto was complicated. Sometimes he was nice and sometimes, he was just cold. His words could sting like a bee at times. He was mean, wasn't he? But to others, it was all jelly. Where is Sasuke-kun? Sitting on the tree behind us. Sakura immediately jumped and tried to look for her beloved. Once she saw him, she spoke. Why didn't you tell me you were here? It would not have made any difference. Naruto wanted to tell her but he decided against it. He wasted his efforts at times by trying to push the hard reality into Sakura about her mad love for their teammate, but she has never responded in kind. You gon' ignore your future wife like that? Sakura turned to him. I don't need your help to get his attention. Really? Sakura registered the sarcastic tone. She realized, given the look in Naruto's eyes, he'd make a snappy comment if she responded harshly. She glanced at Sasuke for a moment and then sat down beside Naruto once more. Why do you have to be like that? She asked in a quiet tone. Naruto shrugged. Trying to save you. Sakura rolled her eyes. And I deserve a cold response when I try to save you from your dream of becoming Hokage. Naruto glanced at the girl. She was in that mood now. Speaking to him like he was her teammate and the one who has saved her life more than once while her beloved Sasuke chased after their target. What makes you think Naruto Uzumaki cannot achieve his dream? He refers to himself in third person. Sakura smiled. But what was the reason? Nothing really. Just that he wasn't Sasuke Uchiha. The Hokage was someone loved by the village and Naruto wasn't by any stretch. After a couple of moments, Kakashi arrived. The Jonin called Sasuke to be closer. The Uchiha appeared, leaning against the trunk of the tree, hands folded across his chest. I've decided that we can take 2 weeks rest. But I expect all of you to continue training. Just know that if we are wanted for a mission, we will have to go. We must always be ready to serve. Hi, Naruto responded, getting up. We missed the last Chunin exams, when are we going to join? While still Genin, we cannot do higher ranked missions. The exams are held every 6 months. Each village holds own exams. We will discuss that at a later date. Kakashi stared at Sasuke. I didn't think you were in a hurry to become a Chunin. I just want to get stronger. That response should have been predictable but Kakashi had hoped for something else. He shook his head. If you need anything, find me. He disappeared in a puff of smoke. Well, Naruto could use with some reading. And he needed to find a genjutsu master in this village to better learn the style or else he would continue to fall for Sasuke's tricks. Allowing the Tem to get one over was nothing more than a boost to his bloated pride and Uchiha superior complex. I'm going to the library to read some books. Are you going to be there tomorrow? Naruto glanced at Sasuke through the corner of his eyes. A hateful bastard whose hatred for his elder brother would only make the Biju within him giggle with pleasure. The only debate would only be whether the Kyuubi's hatred for humans and especially Konoha is more than the hatred Sasuke harbored for Itachi. Thinking of the elder Uchiha, Naruto shook his head. The mention of the name was the only thing one needed to trigger Sasuke's anger. He lacked control over his emotions. Sometimes he truly looked like an unstable person who could blow up at any moment. But he was a friend and the only person who could understand his pain and loneliness. Naruto thought he needed to indulge the Uchiha a bit, just until he was able to twist him a little. A work in progress, but he would soon need to dip his fangs into the Uchiha's neck. Sure, Sasuke was gone the moment he finished talking. Naruto just rolled his eyes and then started to walk away. "Wait, Naruto," Sakura called, rushing over to him. "Let me join you." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "What is with that look? I'm just surprised you'd willingly join me for a round in the library. I've gone to the library more than you. And your newfound love for knowledge has only started since we became genin. Change is inevitable." "Oh great, here comes a problem," Kiba grumbled, seeing Naruto casually walk toward them. It wasn't that Kiba necessarily hated Naruto, he just disliked the effect the blonde had on Hinata. And his often sly way of talking. If they were in front of people, he usually ended with a red face, painted with either humiliation or extreme anger. Hinata quickly turned around, forgetting whatever she had been doing with Kurenai. The Genjutsu master released a long breath as she too turned to the incoming blonde. Shino was the only one whose reaction was much more subtle. Then again, Kiba had competition and with Hinata it was the object of her affections. "What do you want?" Kiba stepped forward, Akamaru along with him. The dog growled, though Naruto's reaction was an amused mask, which only seemed to make Kiba angry. "What's so funny? You want to receive a beating? From you? Wouldn't it be more appropriate to say a biting? In that case no, I would rather not." Kiba glared for a long second and then let loose of a long breath. He was getting worked over, and if he continued, Naruto was just going to press him in the laugh all the way to Ikaraku Ramen. "That is no way to treat someone, Kiba." Kurenai's voice was stern, and she had her eyes right at Naruto. "You don't know him well, Kurenai-sensei." That was true. Kurenai knew of the blonde. Who didn't? All the Jonin knew of Naruto Uzumaki. If you went to the streets and asked about a blonde with whisker marks, they'd point to him. But Kurenai had never spoken to him. Not once. She didn't even remember being so closer to him that he could step on her shadow. So, she didn't know him. She had never displayed any curiosity in knowing him. He didn't make any trouble with anyone. Mokuden. There was a rumor, but the village didn't confirm it nor deny it. But that was still not enough to interest Kurenai. He was here now, and she wished she knew him. Kiba could be rude, but he wasn't hostile. Dogs will always bark when they feel their territory is under dark. Naruto's voice was light, almost careless. "But Kiba, why must you display wild instincts like this? I don't like you." Akamaru barked as if to agree with Kiba. "Wow, I'm hurt, and I thought we had a special relationship." Naruto wiped out a fake tear and then turned to face Hinata. "Can you believe this, Hinata-chan? Kiba-chan doesn't like me. What did I do? Don't bring Hinata into this." Naruto chuckled, waving past Kiba. He stopped in front of Hinata, smiling warmly. She had her hands around her chest, poking her fingers with her cheeks reddening. Her reactions were always amusing and he enjoyed teasing. "Hello, Hinata." She mumbled something and looked down, but kept her fingers tangling. Naruto put his hand under her chin, lifting her head to face him. "My Hinata, you feel a little hot. Want to take off that jacket?" Held back from laughing when her eyes closed and she nearly fell. But he caught her and laid her down gently. She had simply fainted. "You did that on purpose." Kiba stared. "Did what? Was I not supposed to speak to her nicely?" Naruto asked, acting oblivious to what he had just done. "You know what I'm talking about." Naruto smiled. Of course he did, and he did what he did not because he disliked Hinata or anything. Actually, he liked her honesty and that she liked him. She did need to start behaving normal. But he teased her because he wanted her to step out of her comfort zone and start getting used to his presence. "Are you just jealous that you don't have the same effect on her?" Before Kiba could respond, Kurenai clapped her hands to get their attention. She stared at Naruto, just wondering what he wanted. His relationship with Kiba was something else. But there didn't seem to be malice and he had already greeted Shino already by nodding his head. "Why would you do something like that?" Kurenai asked, a bit more sternly than she would have liked. But her stern tone didn't seem to have registered with Naruto. In fact, he didn't even twitch as he responded in a casual tone. Hinata is purely kind. She is afraid of harming others. A wrong attitude for a kunoichi. But glaringly, she lacks confidence. We learn by experience. The more I am closer to her, the more my presence becomes tolerable to her and she can be brave enough to speak. So, he wasn't doing that just for a laugh. She had gotten the wrong thought. He was trying to help Hinata. He could do it in a better way. She did lack confidence, and her fear of harming others is the reason she lost her title as heiress of the Hyuga clan. What can we help you with, Naruto? Ah yes, Naruto stepped toward the Jonin. Kurenai was a wonderfully looking woman. Her ruby eyes were alluring. He smiled, wondering if he should comment on her looks. But then figured since she was older and he was just a brat, she might think he was some pervert. The others he knew. Kiba he knew. Shino he knew. With Hinata, it was simple. He adapted himself to their personalities. To suit himself and to know how to predict them. It was nice living like that. Focusing on the Jonin, Naruto spoke once more with a smile. Kurenai Yuhi, should I call you Kurenai-sensei? That is fine. Kurenai-sensei then. Naruto's expression changed slightly. It was a little more serious. I have been training and my teammate has exposed a fatal flaw in me. Genjutsu. I have been told that you are the best genjutsu user in the village. And I want to learn a couple of things. Well, not become a genjutsu master. But I want to have an understanding that will help me be able to counter it. I came here to request your help and would be grateful if you could help. He bowed slightly. Kurenai was taken aback by the request. A genin wanting to learn a little about genjutsu. Not even her students had asked that much of her. Why do you want to understand it, not master it? I think at the moment, trying to master it would be impossible for me. My teammate can master genjutsu fine. She is smart enough, but what helps her is that she has perfect control over her chakra. But that is to be expected since she has this much. Naruto raised an index finger making a tiny symbol. On the other hand, my chakra levels are just too huge for me to perfectly control now. I can and will, but now I have other priorities. Kurenai looked thoughtful for a moment. I'll speak to your sensei first, maybe the Sandame. Naruto was not just any brat after all. The third Hokage would have keen interest in what is taught the blonde. Of course, Naruto replied with a nod. I look forward to hearing from you, Kurenai-sensei. He turned away, facing Kiba, and then smiled. See you around, Kiba-chan tilde, he said, and then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Kurenai blinked. Was that a Kage Bunshin? A knock at the door? Who could it be? Hardly. Did anyone ever come to his door? Naruto would never claim to be the most social animal. But he does become loud when in crowds. Oh, it's the perverted Sannin. It was a subdued response from Naruto that made Jiraiya raise an eyebrow. He was a Sannin and the blonde couldn't show enthusiasm at having a figure like him knock on his door. Brats of today, they had no respect for the elder generation. Then again, Jiraiya could never say that he had a great relationship with the blonde. It wasn't that Naruto disliked him or anything, he was just indifferent to him. Unexpectedly, his expectations when he first appeared before Naruto was a look of awe and praise, but Naruto hadn't even recognized him at first glance. Even when he gloriously introduced himself, there was not even a change of emotion. What is with that response? Jiraiya asked, as he stepped inside Naruto's apartment. He'd been warned not to just burst inside as if the place belonged him. And he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. Naruto shut the door behind him and then walked over to his kitchen where the table was littered with scrolls. He sat down, picked up a scroll, silently studied it for a couple of moments and then glanced at the Jiraiya who was looking at him questionably. You came at a wrong time, that's as why. Once you realize I came here for you with a gift, you won't be saying that. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You sound excited. Well, I am going to give you something that is really powerful and of which I am a custodian. Oh, Naruto stared back the scroll. Mokuton truly was powerful, but also difficult. The jutsu he needed to do and performed by the Shodai Hokage required a great deal of chakra. He was burning a lot more because of adequate chakra control. He needed to get better to be able to execute this jutsu. The simple things that Yamato did could be done. But they bored Naruto. They lacked imagination. The monstrous feats performed by the Shodai however excited him. But at the same time frustrated him because of how complex they were. Either way, once he got a grasp of everything, he would be sitting pretty. I don't think it would be anything more important than Mokuden. Even better, at least from where I stand. Jiraiya grinned. I want you to sign a toad contract. You'll be able to summon the toads during battle and you will even become a sage, like me, and the Yondaime Hokage. The Shodai Hokage was also a sage. If you learn this, it will strengthen your jutsu. I've read that sage are extremely powerful. These scrolls do point to the power of sage jutsu. That is why I said this was important. The excitement in Jiraiya was clearly apparent. What stopped him from raving was Naruto's indifference. Naruto folded the scroll he was reading and then faced Jiraiya. By the way, I'm just a clone. Jiraiya blinked, and then stared. How had he not recognized that? Before he could even say anything, the clone disappeared in a puff of smoke. Forest of Death. Jiraiya found Naruto sitting on dense roots, head resting on the palm of his right hand, with his legs folded. He moved closer, and then touched the roots. Naruto must have created it. He hadn't thought that the blonde had improved this much with his control over Mokuden. Last time, Naruto could only create a clone. But as he was told by the Sandaime, Naruto thought the Mokuden clones were useless, unless he was embedding explosive tags within them. What is it about the toad contract? Jiraiya stared at Naruto. His expression was flat, but he was looking directly at him. Whether he was interested or not was another matter. He had found that even when the blonde was smiling at times, he was difficult to read. But having lived in the environment he found himself within, Naruto must have learned to read expressions better than anyone, and that meant being able to school his features as well. Why couldn't I realize it was a clone? That. Naruto changed positions. It is a simple matter of chakra. With me, you can only tell which is which by measuring up my chakra levels. If you know me enough, you'll tell the difference. Considering that you have not seen me in a couple of years, it is understandable that you could not tell. I see, you don't sound happy to see me, more or less, Jiraiya grumbled. Naruto blinked. Must I be? He tilted his head slightly. He knew why Jiraiya always tried to get closer to him. And it had nothing to do with the Kyuubi or Mokuden. If it was Yamato, he could understand. It was about his parents. Jiraiya just could never be open about it, like his sensei. Must you not be? At times, Jiraiya wondered just how smart Naruto was. Sometimes, he thought the blonde was manipulative. There was evidence to back it up. It was just something he felt whenever Naruto opened his mouth. At this, he thought that Naruto was trying to take him toward another subject that he didn't want to entertain. I don't see a reason I should be. You are just Jiraiya the Toad Sage to me. There is no other relations I could speak of. If it was Kakashi-sensei, I could smile. He is my sensei. Naruto shook his head and then changed the subject. The contract. Why do you want me to sign it? I want to take you as my student in the near future. Oh, that is surprising. That would be cool. Naruto stood up. But we can talk about the contract then. I'm little familiar with how that works. But I suppose toads would be a lot more helpful as partners in battle compared to Kakashi-sensei's summons. But it doesn't answer why I must be your student. You rarely take students. Must there be a reason for wanting to take a student? Yes, there has to be reason. It is either it is something personal or you just see the potential and want to mold it. That is reason enough. Naruto already knew the reason. He knew, but he didn't like people trying to get close to him under false pretense. Weren't there enough lies already? Must there be more to it? Jiraiya frowned. Naruto wasn't that starved of affection that he was willing to jump into the hands of anyone who showed him care. Perhaps he'd underestimated his strength and that he would have thought that just by simply showing up, the blonde would be all over him. It wasn't a matter of trust. Or maybe it was. After all, Naruto wanted to know the reason behind his goodwill. Jiraiya had reasons, but he didn't want to share. This was all going to give him a headache. The third is my sensei and he has asked me to look after you. You are a valuable member of Konoha who uses Mokuden. We have high hopes for you. The Sannin then grinned. You want to surpass even the Yondaime Hokage, don't you? I was his sensei. I can help you. Naruto jumped from the roots and landed beside Jiraiya. He held out his right hand, stared at it while deliberating events that could have possibly unfolded. The Sandaime couldn't have forced this on him. If anything, a better teacher for him was Yamato. If the old man was going to force a sensei on him, it would be his fellow Mokuden user. Jiraiya couldn't assist him with his training in that regard, so, it wouldn't make complete sense for the Sannin to be forced on him. I have been alone since I was born, Jiraiya-sama. Mokuden, is that the only thing valuable about me? I have asked myself this question time and time again. Sometimes it is about the Kyuubi. I wonder, is it the only reason the Sandaime is even close to me? If it was because of the Biju, then he would have made sure I learned to control its power. But the Sandaime sees me as a child. I think, if it was possible, he'd rather I not even use the power. But that is just wishful thinking. One day, I will have to use this power. He glanced at Jiraiya at the corner of his eyes. I've already said, we can talk about the contract when we get to the stage where I learn from you. Is there anything else? He was losing this battle. The Toad contract was his entrance to Naruto's life. And what was that reasoning? It made him cautious, wary even, but he resisted the urge to look at Naruto with suspicion. You have no issues studying under me. My strength is my own and I already live under the cloud of the Kyuubi. My desire is to carve out my own identity. I do not want to be known as the student of the Sannin. I want to be Naruto Uzumaki. He looked up into the burning sun. Quickly, he looked away. I've been known by other names. Kyuubi brat, demon, many things. Studying under you gives me the chance to learn more valuable things. But I won't become your apprentice. The Yondaime was your apprentice, yes. If Jiraiya was not saddened by Naruto's talk, he would have been trying to argue with him. But he could understand. To want Naruto to adopt his ideals would be denying him what he has been denied all his life, an identity that he crafted for himself. That is fine. Is there anything else? You done training? You kind of ruined the mood. Besides, I'm feeling a little hungry. I need to eat. Rest up, for there is more training later on with Sasuke. Naruto smiled. And oh, I'm not refusing your help. But there is one condition. What? I'll tell you when you come to tell me we should begin our training together. Hint. I lived my life not knowing why I was hated, every night asking myself why I was called a demon, the Kyuubi and other names. And that was because the old man refused to tell me. Had I known, things would have been simple and less painful. Making me sign the Toad contract means I become the next Toad Sage, your successor. If that is going to happen, if I choose to permit it, you'd have to start by showing me all your cards. If not, I will walk alone. I've done that for most of my life, building my own strength. And I know I can continue with it. Of course, he was only going to accept Jiraiya's help if he couldn't find the secrets behind the Shodai's Sage Jutsu. Signing the Toad contract would be made pointless if he could attain the same sage power as the first. How is it even going with Mokuden? Jiraiya asked instead of responding to Naruto's statement. A look of frustration washed over Naruto. Frustrating, he replied. I suppose I do require guidance from Yamato. Jiraiya found Kakashi at the memorial stones. The Jonin was standing still, unmoving with a dark cloud hanging over his head. Some things were never going to change. The Jonin was still ravaged by guilt and regrets. His life has truly been a tragedy. It was no wonder he had failed prospective genin over the years, because he did not want the tragedy to repeat itself. Jiraiya stopped by the Jonin's right side and stared down. Rin. The teammate Kakashi had killed. He glanced at the Jonin through the corner of his left eye and spoke. We need to talk. Naruto. Kakashi responded after a few moments of silence. Yes. Kakashi continued staring at Rin's name for a couple of seconds before responding in a quiet tone. You spoke to him. If the Sannin was like this, then he had met the blonde genin. A complicated person, yet a person who took things in a simple manner. Perhaps it was because he had seen much worse. There would be no denying that. Yeah. Jiraiya paused, spreading his senses around. Once satisfied, he continued speaking. What am I missing? How far is he even with Mokuden? Kakashi adopted a thoughtful look on his face. He can defeat Sasuke, and that is someone hailed as a genius. He may be much stronger he looks. I don't know his full capacity with Mokuden. He doesn't use it that much. He rarely does so. I asked him about it and he said what he could do would be a mockery of what the Shodai could. He said it with an embarrassed look on his face. He sets higher standards for himself. But hardly surprising, he has good grasp of ninjutsu. How good? You'll see, Kakashi responded. But that is not what you came to talk about, is it? He may be a little difficult to crack. That is because Naruto is not gullible. He is independent and not too trusting. Just because you are Jiraiya doesn't mean he is willingly going to go with you. One more thing, he is adept to lies. He has seen people lie to him more than enough. There were times when he tried to make friends and it all ended horribly wrong. The best policy is just to avoid the issue than tell an outright lie. That was something the Sandaime was rather good at. But of course, Naruto wasn't going to trouble anyone but calling them on their lies. What did you want anyway? I wanted to have him sign the Toad contract and told him I wanted him to become my student, he smiled sadly. He didn't seem too thrilled about it. But he did not refuse. Naruto does value his independence. Still, just how smart is the brat? His words seemed intentionally leading. Kakashi shrugged indifferently. Most of the times, Naruto was a pleasant person with no hidden intentions. There was nothing suspicious about him. He had observed the blonde long enough. Smart enough. He reserves that attitude for you. And a little for the Sandame. With everyone else, he is a delight. Training Ground 7. Naruto fell to the ground on his back, careless of the dust. He was just worn out and only wanted to take a nap. He ignored the pain when he hit the ground and glanced at his right. A battered and bruised Sasuke followed his example. He turned away from the last Uchiha and stared up at the green leaves that hid the sun from them. Training with Sasuke was brutal. But he enjoyed it. Sasuke was faster than him. He was a lot more fluid with his movements. A compliment he would never openly admit to the Uchiha, lest he puffs up that arrogance. Physical strength, Naruto had and his reactions were improving. The first part was improving physical prowess. At any fight, you were going to use taijutsu. It was just the basic that sometimes proved to be the difference between victory and defeat. Itachi must be starting to get afraid now, Naruto said so purposely, just to see Sasuke's reaction. The reaction was predictably instant. Sasuke flashed a hateful look toward him. His amused look only served to press the Uchiha the wrong way. You're just predictable that way, Naruto faced the leaves. Not once did he think Sasuke would suddenly throw a kunai at him. After all, this was his partner. In missions, Sasuke was the one who watched his back, and he did so diligently. After a long moment, Sasuke bottled his anger and then responded. When are you going to start using that bloodline? You're going to ignore that talk just now. There is nothing to talk about. Naruto snorted. If you end up getting filled up by hot air, it is something to talk about. I fear that the day he appears before you, you are going to recklessly attack him even when you cannot even lick his boots. Sasuke glared at him through gritted teeth. You do not understand. Of course I don't know. I have never claimed to understand, but I know enough that at this stage, you're going to end up getting swallowed, Naruto smiled sadly. You are my friend, the only person I can truly call a friend in this village, and it would be sad if you did something reckless. How would you react to someone who killed your parents? Your entire clan just because he wanted to test his strength? The anger and pain, the betrayal, Naruto could feel it all. Sasuke must have truly looked up to his elder brother. Naruto could never understand what it meant to have an elder brother to love you. He had no one. Younger, he had come to believe that he may truly be what the village called him. I don't know. I have not yet hated someone to that level. But you know I'm a Jinchuriki. Sakura is ignorant, so, it can't be helped. Despite your superior complex, you must know just how I'm treated in this village. The same look you have when you think of Itachi, is the same look the villagers give me. Sasuke knew. He had known long ago how Naruto was viewed. He was loved and Naruto was hated. The fact that Sakura could not see this was just ludicrous. But she was that ignorant. She shouldn't be a kunoichi really. The Kyuubi caused a rampage in this village that killed many people. I can understand their hatred for it. Yes, that is why I'll say, in some ways, you and the villagers seem alike at times. Don't put me in the same bracket as those ignorant people. Sasuke replied in a stern tone. Seemingly offended. I understand their anger for the Kyuubi but not their hatred for you. Does not change anything. You are still the same. Hateful people who cannot see past their hatred. You ought to learn to control your emotions. I'm almost certain that you'd abandon anything just to kill your brother. Killing him is the reason I live. How I pity you, Sasuke. To simply dedicate your entire life to killing just one man. The Uchiha won't be revived. What honor is there in doing so? Instead of trying to create new memories of the Uchiha, you are just going on a dark path. Sasuke snorted. Dark path? What of you? Don't compare me to you, you hateful child. I'm content with my life. I have dreams. I have desires. Negative thoughts. I have them. There is no person doesn't have negative thoughts. The difference is that I don't indulge my thoughts. I master them. I control them. Sasuke wanted scoff but he knew better. When it came to self-control, Naruto had that. And he didn't seem to particularly hate the villagers for their treatment of him. What is your goal? Sasuke asked curiously. Naruto faced up into the sky and then replied, I have many things I want to achieve. So many things, Sasuke. Maybe you could say I want change. He paused, sensing a new chakra presence. In restoring your clan, didn't you say you want to restore your clan? Naruto smiled. I'm certain that Sakura will be more than happy to carry your children. Sasuke groaned just thinking of the Pinkett. Why did you have to bring her up? Because she is coming. Sasuke's eyes snapped toward the clearing. There she was, blushing all the way toward them along with Ino. If it was not because he was tired, he would be getting up to flee. He hated her affections. They were a nuisance and she was nothing more than a burden in missions. She did not take anything seriously. If you say anything I find troubling, I'm going to stab you tomorrow when we train. That is just dark, Sasuke. Then again, you are the Dark Avenger of the Uchiha clan, Naruto said with a laugh. You should loosen up a little. Being stiff and broody is the reason those who know you actually hate your guts. Naruto sometimes didn't mince the words. But Sasuke was not bothered by it. Not even a little. Those insults didn't do anything to him. Is it just how you act all carefree in front of other people but then change when you are alone? I don't even have a need for other people. What I need is power. Oh, you power-hungry fool. If you're not careful, you'll betray everyone one day. The love for power has driven many astray. But you probably don't care about that. You just want to kill your brother and would even sell your own soul to get the power. Naruto shook his head. It is truly sad. You fail to see what is important to life. He paused, sensing that Sakura and Ino were upon them. Seems like a serious conversation is happening here. Ino was the first to speak as she stopped beside him, staring into his eyes with her hands placed around her waist. Naruto smirked. Well, we were thinking about doing a double date. You know, you and me. Sasuke and his beloved Sakura-chan. He was saying that he secretly does crush over her. Sakura allowed herself to dream, just thinking about a shy Sasuke confessing his love for her. Her daydream was crushed when Ino burst out in laughter. It was just the kind of laugh that shattered all hopes. It was made worse when Naruto joined her. They were laughing at her. She was glared at the two and then looked at Sasuke. They are making fun of you, Sasuke-kun. Naruto snickered when the Uchiha ignored Sakura. Why would you say something like that? You have more chances with him than my dear Sakura. Arg. Naruto jumped. What the hell, Ino? How could you say something like that? I don't swing that way. Who'd even like this brooding bastard? Ino allowed an innocent smile to settle on her lips. Well, you have gone far better than Sakura. I mean, you two have kissed. She was trying to hold herself from laughing. Naruto fell on his butt and then leaned against the tree's trunk. An expressionless mask settled for a second as he replied. Don't remind me the horrors. But I remember you and your gang, led by the cheerleader-in-chief trying to kill me. Who are you calling a cheerleader? Sakura exclaimed, glaring at him. Naruto shrugged. You cheered and encouraged Sasuke at the academy. Even followed him home and then jeered anyone you perceived to be an enemy. Sakura had no response. Always when Naruto and Ino combined, she was always left without a place. She honestly envied their relationship. They never hung together, but whenever their paths crossed, they acted like best friends. Naruto was her teammate and she couldn't even interact with him in the same way. Then again, Naruto seemed to get along even with the others. He bickered with Kiba but that had to do with Hinata and it was always friendly. The same could be said about Sasuke. In her silence, Naruto spoke, addressing Ino. I frown with disappointment each time I think that you were actually part of that group, Ino. He said with a stare. The look on his face clearly complimented his words. Ino folded her hands across her chest. I was a child then. She huffed. You're an adult now. I've grown. Don't you know, once we become shinobi, we are no longer considered children. Those are just words of a brat who wants to enter the world of adults a little too early. Naruto shrugged. What brings you here? We just came to check up on you. Kakashi-sensei told me you were training here. Sakura answered. Their usual training ground was currently off limits. The Anbu were supposedly using the forest for something and they were told to keep out. You spoke to Kakashi-sensei. It was Sasuke speaking, for the first time since the two girls arrived. He seemed curious about that. Well, Sakura smiled brightly. I wanted his help about my own training. I don't want to be left behind the two of you, and besides, she knew that sometimes, she was a drag to the others. Naruto always had to save her when things became dangerous. Things are looking bright, Naruto remarked. So, how about our double date? Who said I want to go on a date with you? Ino asked, staring at him. Naruto put on a hurt look. Wow, I actually thought you liked me, Ino. But I was wrong. He shook his head, smiling sadly. Let's call it a day, Sasuke. I don't think I'll be able to come in tomorrow. I'm a little hurt at the moment. It might take some time to recover. Damn, don't think I can even stand you. Sakura obsesses over you, and even the delightful Ino. You almost sound believable, you know. Wait, Sakura butt in, a surprised look on her face. He was faking that. Naruto and Ino looked at each other before shaking their heads. Was there something in particular you wanted? Kakashi-sensei said I could join you too. He said it would help better improve our teamwork. Great. It was not Naruto who responded, but Sasuke. He wasn't being sarcastic either. The Uchiha then stood and then faced Naruto. Tomorrow, then. Naruto nodded. Sasuke then turned to walk away. Wait, Tem, Naruto called. You forgot something. Sasuke stopped and then turned around. He gave that look that clearly said, what? In the most unpleasant way. The chip you carry on your shoulder. Sasuke glared. Naruto laughed. Amused, Ino gave her hand to help Naruto get up. Once he took it, she spoke. Are you always like this? What? Pissing off Sasuke, and making fun at the expense of Sakura? Of course not. I'm a delightful person, he replied with a foxy grin. Sakura doesn't say. Naruto shrugged and leaned in on Ino's right side. And then whispered. Sasuke has her so whipped. I can save her life now, while he just watches without interest, and she could go and dream that I was Sasuke who saved her life and wake up the following day believing so. Ino scoffed, but she would not disagree with Naruto. When it came to Sasuke, Sakura didn't want to hear anything. Her devotion and love for him was honestly disturbing. She just could never grow out of her academy days fantasies. She shook her head. At least, since graduating and experiencing a bit more of the shinobi world, she had grown. Sasuke didn't care for Sakura. It was debatable that her friend even saw this. Even if she did, she most likely had some reason or an excuse to condone it. You are her teammate, aren't you supposed to help? Naruto shrugged, removing himself from Ino. I try, he said before turning to Sakura. Be here tomorrow at 8 a.m. He then smiled at Ino. Later, Ino-chan tilde. Ino thought to give him the middle finger, but she smiled warmly. The poor guy already had a tough time living in this village, and he was not a bad person despite what others may claim. She just wished Sakura was a little nicer to him. What is with you and him? Ino shrugged. I should be asking you the same question. He gets in the way. Jealousy isn't a good thing, Sakura. I don't want to hear that from you. Well, Naruto was right. When it came to Sasuke, Sakura was stubborn. But she could understand. She too had been stuck in this kind of life before. She had been a fangirl, competing with Sakura and the other girls, because Sasuke was cool. But now, she didn't think so. Hokage office. The Sandaime smiled pleasantly after Jiraiya stepped into his office. It always gave him some comfort when he saw his only loyal student around. It gave him a pat on the back, always telling himself that not everything he has done was a total loss. He shouldn't even be active now, but he couldn't quit, because his students had disappointed. But at least, Jiraiya was still breathing and serving Konoha to the best of his abilities. When did you return, Jiraiya? Yesterday, the Sannin responded, staring at his sensei. You look a little happier than last time I saw you. I was still dealing with Naruto after he confronted me about the Kyuubi. He smiled. He should have known that it would happen. The Biju was sealed within after all. It was a difficult moment for him. He'd never seen Naruto look so betrayed and hurt. For some days, he'd thought that perhaps his relationship with Naruto was over. But now things are looking good. For you maybe. Jiraiya paused, shaking his head. I met him. My road is going to be a little more difficult. Hardly surprising. Ever since realizing that I kept the truth about the Kyuubi from him, Naruto has come to conclude that there are many things I'm hiding from him, even about his parents. That was a touchy subject that Hiruzen always tried to ignore, but he had a feeling Naruto suspected something. He just could never ask because he knew it was going to be an emotional talk that may not be pleasant for him. He knew it was only a matter of time before this happened. You think he knows something? I don't know. He probably suspects something. He is not that stupid, and we don't know what Orochimaru told him. Hiruzen shook his head. He always dreaded the thought. Have you spoken to Tsunade? I saw her. The Sannin frowned. She refused to return, still racking up gambling debts and roaming around freely. She is only safe because she is a Sannin. He shook his head. She won't return, allowing Tsunade to roam free despite her talents, one of the things that has earned him some angry retorts from Danzo. Worse, there was also Orochimaru, who he had allowed to leave, simply because he could not kill his own student. But he'd understood Tsunade's pain and allowed her to cool her head, but it didn't seem like she was ever going to come back home. You think I have given her enough to work over her issues? Well, it isn't like you can send Anbu after her. But you can force her to return. Tsunade is a valuable kunoichi to Konoha, and we are wasting her talents by allowing her to roam free. Naive, indecisive, and frequently lacking the spine to do what has been done. The thoughts haunted Hiruzen. You've just never been willing to go that far. Jiraiya cared for Tsunade, but he didn't know about forcing her to return to the village. There was no war. The village was not under any attack. She was not needed, but he understood. Hiruzen wanted someone to replace him as Hokage. He had already turned down the request, but maybe Tsunade could do it. When you meet her next time, tell her she will be branded a rogue shinobi and a bounty on her head will be placed. That puts her life in danger. There are dangerous criminals out there who wouldn't waste time terrorizing her. She is powerful enough to handle any threats, but if she does not want to face that threat, she just has to return home. She doesn't have to become Hokage. She can run the hospital and train new pupils. The village is lacking in recent years. If you are not going to do it, I will send someone else to send the message. Hiruzen spoke in a hardened tone, staring directly at the Sannin. Jiraiya merely nodded. He wasn't going to argue with the third. The Akatsuki is still making moves. But Orochimaru has already left the organization. Their objective is something that remains unknown. However, we must continue to keep an eye on them. If the likes of Itachi are part of the group, it really has to be taken seriously. The great nations were never at peace with each other. As long as the other was not threatened by the Akatsuki, no one was going to do anything. Hiruzen had even heard that the Tsuchikage was excessively using the organization, and even Kumo at some point. There was word that even the Case was using it. They seemed to be effective in their missions. No one saw them as a threat, as long as they did their work outside of the great nations. Keep an eye on things. We thought his place in the Sound was only a place for hideouts, but it has now become a fully fledged village. He smiled bitterly, but knowing him, it is just another way for him to get access to people for his experiments. He already has hideouts around the shinobi world. Yes, find out whatever information you can find about this village, and be in contact with the Sound. We cannot in good conscience just watch when we know what is happening. He is our problem, and we will deal with it. Hiruzen knew that Jiraiya had never had any intentions of killing his former friend. But Hiruzen was now willing to do what must be done. What was love when it ignored the suffering of the many people in favor of a twisted shinobi who only cared about his experiments and power? You want to invade the Sound? Orochimaru's village, the third Hokage corrected. Get me the information I need and I will decide what must happen. If Orochimaru's village becomes strong, he will no doubt come after Konoha. He already holds a grudge. You think he would attack Konoha? Jiraiya wanted to reject this, but this was Orochimaru they were talking about. He was arrogant enough to plan an attack and twisted enough to make an attempt to execute it. How things change. Some years ago, he was trying to get the man to return to the village. But who would have accepted him after what he did? And not to mention, he had already hit them where it hurt the most, with Naruto. Of course, that was something they all tried to ignore. The village didn't even know about, only a few knew. If they knew, it would only add to the burden on Naruto. Speaking in a bitter tone, the Toad Sage added, "We speak of wanting peace, but even after everything that Orochimaru did, I was willing to forgive him because he was a friend. But now I think about, what about those many parents who lost their children because of him? Who was even going to forgive him for his crimes? He hasn't even stopped doing what he was doing in this village. We are often willing to overlook certain things when it affects us personally. And when we think it is someone we know, we always think that there is a chance for them to repent, ignoring the pain of others." Hiruzen smiled. "We are all guilty of that in some times of our lives. But we must now do what we must be done. Orochimaru cannot be changed. I wish he could, but we cannot ignore what he has done. If he was someone we had no personal connection with, we wouldn't care. What the Akatsuki is doing now is less horrible compared to the pain and damage he has done. But with them, we are quick to act. Because we have no relations. He shook his head. One person who'd gladly even lead the attack would be Danzo. He has campaigned for action to be taken against the Sannin for a long time now. I will gather what I can. Jiraiya's expression turned serious. Do you talk about what happened with Naruto after Orochimaru had him kidnapped? Hiruzen's smile slipped. No, it is something that still weighs on Naruto heavily. From the village to Orochimaru, that is something I think he tries to pretend never even happened. That is helped because memories are abundled. We had considered sealing those memories, but it would have done more harm than good. We will eventually have to deal with it. Of course, I'm waiting on him to talk about it. For now, Naruto is happy. He has friends, and is finding ways to deal with the villagers' hatred. I want him to handle things at his pace. He performs well when no one is rushing him. Kakashi has always been a complicated person but easy to deal with. But Kurenai couldn't say he was her friend. She'd only joined the Jonin Club only recently. Even when the Kyuubi was attacking Konoha, she was one of those who were not allowed to enter the battlefield because they were young ones who had a bright future ahead of them. She smiled, looking at the silver-haired Jonin who was walking up to her, hands inside his pockets, a rather disinterested look about him. Then again, as far as she has known, he has always been like that. Sorry to call you out so suddenly. Kakashi waved his right hand. I wasn't doing anything. I called you out because one of your students made a request to me a couple of days ago. I wasn't sure how to handle it, so I thought it would be best to speak to you first before making a decision. Kakashi had thought she wanted something, personally, but not one of his students going to her. For a moment, he stared at her. If anyone was approaching her it would be about genjutsu. The only person who'd ask that was most likely Sakura. She was the one who showed promise due to her excellent chakra control. But Sakura asking help on training to another sensei? It didn't seem to fit. From what he knew, she had quit training with both her teammates after the first day. But anything could happen. Sakura. Kurenai shook her head. Naruto. That was surprising. He didn't see it coming. Kakashi had to stare at the woman to see if she wasn't just joking. But Naruto and genjutsu, the two didn't seem to click. Naruto wasn't even suited for genjutsu. I thought the person asking you would be Sakura. She has displayed potential with genjutsu. Naruto on the other hand has massive chakra reserves, and no perfect control over it. He mentioned that, and still wants to learn genjutsu. You didn't know about it. Kakashi shook his head. He has been training with Sasuke over the past week. He didn't say anything about it last time we spoke. Oh, Kurenai paused, thinking. He didn't say he want to exactly learn how to use genjutsu. He said he wants to understand it because it was his weakness. I don't have a problem with it but he is your student, and I didn't want to start teaching him anything without talking to you first. No, it is fine, Kakashi replied. If Naruto wants to learn and if you have no problem with it, you can teach him. Considering that Naruto was the Jinchuriki with a rather dark cloud following him around, Kakashi thought she would have reservations about it. He smiled. At least even with everything, there were people who were willing to overlook all that and do what they thought was right. And the third Hokage, should I speak to him as well? I mean, given his special circumstances, Kurenai spoke with caution. Kakashi shrugged indifferently. It won't be a problem. But if you want to be at ease, you can still speak to him. Training Ground 7. If there was anything disappointing about this team, it had to be Haruno Sakura. Ever since she joined them for a single training session and then walked away halfway, Naruto had never seen her again. Perhaps he and Sasuke had pushed her a little harder. She had gone home limping and battered. But pushing her limits was the best way to improve her. The Uchiha had predicted that she wouldn't return. Not that it hadn't been a prediction worth gloating about. Sakura refused to do hard, and had said their training was too hard for her. It should have been suspected that she would quit, but not halfway through the first day. You're making me uncomfortable. Sakura gave Naruto a side glance. They were standing under a tree, waiting for their sensei to arrive. Sasuke was sitting up on the tree, looking like he would rather be somewhere than here. She knew why Naruto was staring and she knew it was disappointing, but it didn't make her feel any good. Sorry, I got lost in thought. Why do you think Kakashi-sensei called us? Mission most likely. Some clients choose who they want. I wouldn't be surprised if some people come to choose our sensei. He is famous after all. They'd probably be horrified that the famous Jonin was a tardy kind of person who didn't seem to take things seriously. Naruto knew better, of course. Everyone had his own demons to fight. He'd come to see that in this life of a journey, it was a rough ride that would cripple him if he was not strong enough. The hatred from the villagers. He'd managed to stomach it, but the shinobi world could corrupt it all by forcing him into situations where someone had to die to protect his teammates or the mission. I thought we'd get a little more time. Naruto shrugged. He glanced up at Sasuke for a moment before shaking his head. It complicates things, especially if it is one that takes us a little too far from the village. Indifferent? No, he would be disappointed if that was going to be case. After all, he hadn't even heard back from Kurenai to even begin his study of genjutsu. Yo, Kakashi greeted after popping up in a puff of smoke. Sakura wanted to shout that the man was late, but decided against it. She just sighed and stared at her sensei, hoping that he would not say anything about her running away from training with Sasuke and Naruto. She was glad when he went directly to business. We have a mission. No more training for today. Make sure that you recover and get enough rest. Meet me at the Hokage Tower tomorrow at 1 p.m. sharp. And pack enough gear to last over 3 weeks or more. After saying that, the Jonin disappeared in a puff of smoke. He should have expected this would happen. In almost all missions, Sakura was defenseless. She didn't have anyone's back, but someone always had to have her back. He had already seen the problem it was creating. Naruto usually had to do both his and her duties. Sasuke refused to handle it unless he was forced. This harmony was not going to last forever. He sighed. He didn't want the team to be broken up. But at this point, Sakura was likely going to end up getting killed or one of her teammates hurt because of her weaknesses. And not to mention, their missions could be jeopardized because the team would try to save her and risk the mission. The Sandaime was trying to avoid this situation. Naruto would probably express sadness if she was booted from the team, and Sasuke was likely to just shrug. Or maybe even express hope that their new teammate would become an upgrade. Either way, it wasn't something Sakura was going to take in too well. I understand, hated Orochimaru, but he was losing his composure here. It was amazing just how someone's presence could cause such a reaction and force things out. Just now, he really wanted to just sit down and calm his nerves. After a couple of moments, he rained down on his thoughts, slapped himself across the face and faced his teammates. Sorry about my tone, Sakura, he said. I was a little angry. A little, Sasuke wanted to ask. Sakura couldn't say he was wrong. She wanted to shout, but there was something about the way that Kakashi looked at her and then seemed defeated that occupied much of her thoughts. Instead, she just said it was okay and looked to the other side. I'm not going to apologize to you, Naruto said in sharp tone. He was talking to Sasuke. You deserved it. I don't need apologies. But he would not admit he had put the team in danger by acting in the way he did either. Admittedly, being talked down by Naruto like a child did piss him off. The fact that he couldn't stop himself bothered him much less than being at the receiving end of Naruto's harsh lecture. Come on, let us keep moving. Naruto picked up his bag and then flung it over his shoulders. This was going to be a difficult mission. He wasn't going to hold grudges, and the same was for Sasuke, so it would not affect their teamwork. But he couldn't say the same for Sakura. In the end, it wasn't like she was that useful anyway. Whether she worked with him or not was immaterial to the success of the team, as he and Sasuke mostly did everything. But who could have thought that we would come across such a situation? Naruto asked as they hopped through the trees. Unexpected, but it has nothing to do with the mission. Indeed, he has his interests, but I'm glad nothing happened. It would have been disastrous had he been in the mood to do harm. Naruto may have ended up being taken and returned to a cell with his chakra sealed off. Or maybe Sasuke could have been taken. Someone could have died. Anything was possible. Let us try not to worry about him. We have a mission. If we allow ourselves to get distracted, we will fail. The ship had set sail hours ago. The sea waters surrounded them. Now and then, a small wave would slam into the shields of the ship, but it kept steady. Yet, Naruto couldn't help but wonder what would happen if a more dangerous wave punched into the ship, stuffing in water. The drowning. It would be chaos. Swimming he could do with his eyes closed. But this was the sea. There were many different animals. For him, safety wouldn't be an issue nonetheless. After all, he had the chakra to stay afloat for the long journey back to the land. While staring at the bottomless waters, Naruto thought of continuing with his training. Floating on water did require good chakra control, and to do it continuously while moving would be good for him. He held a hand sign and created a clone. In a puff of smoke, his carbon copy jumped into the waters, hands held together and began the chase from the sides. Naruto turned away from the waters and stared at the happenings within the ship. The director of the movie was sitting behind a camera, shouting orders while the princess flashed her brilliance before the camera. Sakura was gawking over her crush and Sasuke just looked stone-faced, watching over the princess. When he noticed him, the Uchiha moved his feet and then stalked toward him, his movements lacking any real purpose, the stick on his shoulder waving that puffed up Uchiha arrogance. Just one day, he was going to crush all that and humble the Uchiha. Then he would learn to be humble. Or maybe not, he smiled. Sasuke was just likely to haunt him. Sasuke stopped by Naruto and leaned against the ship, eyes staring at the clone through the corner of his eyes. After a moment, he started speaking. Are you going to talk about Orochimaru? That hateful look stared at him. There were many times Naruto realized that while Sasuke's eyes seemed to be on him, they were looking past him. He probably saw Itachi wherever he went. If anyone said the young Uchiha had nightmares of his brother torturing him, Naruto wouldn't find it unbelievable. There is nothing to talk about it. You bothered he brought up your brother. Sasuke wasn't going to bother trying to beg Naruto to talk. He wasn't that curious anyway, at least he told himself that much. The clone, he changed the subject, trying not be like Sakura. Chakra control exercise. If there was a demon that taunted him, it was the massive pool of chakra Naruto had in his possession. There was no competition. Even if he tried, he'd only be courting a humiliating death. He'd nearly fainted after trying to create a couple of Kage Bunshin. It was something else, but it had pissed him off that even an exhausted Naruto could still do that much. The fact that Sakura couldn't create one without dying didn't give him any comfort. Sasuke felt like he was being left behind. It was just chakra control exercises, but it was going to improve his rival while he stood here, watching a film set. Don't even think about jumping in. I don't want to be the one pulling you out while you gulp a few cups of salty waters. Naruto then smirked. Or maybe you could. I'm sure Sakura would be happy to give you mouth to mouth. It didn't take long for Kakashi and Sakura to join them. Naruto gave Sakura a thumbs up. He was sure she hadn't noticed that her attention has been on the princess's co-stars than her beloved Sasuke-kun. What? I can talk to him if you like. I'm not afraid of it, and who knows, it might even make someone jealous and finally confess his love for you. Sakura knew Naruto was teasing. She was sure of it. But she still couldn't help to think. What if something like that were to happen? Wouldn't she become the happiest girl? Like they'd even listen to you. Naruto smiled. You'd be surprised. He turned to their sensei. You think I can get a role? You want to be on a movie? Why not? Maybe I'll also have girls chasing after me after I become a movie star. In your dreams. Naruto ignored Sakura's remark and then watched the princess. Though forced to come here, when the camera flashed in front of her, she became a different person. If she was a spy, she'd be terrifying. She knew how to play a role and she played it perfectly. Still, this is turning out to be a bore, he frowned. He'd been training and he wanted to test out some jutsu. There were no battles, just standing guard. Have to agree with you. I was expecting something else, Sasuke agreed with Naruto. If anything, this was going to turn out to be a joyride. They'd enjoy the sun, walk on snow and be in the presence of some high-profile civilians. But what was that to a shinobi? Sasuke wanted to fight. He needed to become stronger. We don't always have to be fighting, you know. Sakura spoke in a quiet tone. Both Naruto and Sasuke never refused the opportunity to fight. They enjoyed it. This kind of mission suited her. It made her feel safe. She smiled. Was she the one who was supposed to be glowing in that feeling, or their client? We have yet to reach the snow. Things can change, Kakashi said. He knew. Things were going to change. If what he suspected turned out to be true, the mission would please both his male students and put Sakura to the limit. Naruto turned around to face the deep waters. This was life. Without water, there was no life. Not just for humans, but for the animals and everything that has its roots dug deep into the pockets of the soil. Could he attempt Sweden? Water and earth were the ingredients for Mokuden. He could try to learn Sweden while here. The vast waters could offer the opportunity. Naruto nodded to himself and then held a single hand sign. 2 more clones appeared in a puff of smoke. Drinking. Though she appeared happy in the big screen, Naruto had come to learn that the princess was a miserable person. If he could use the word, she was dislikable. Everyone had issues. It wasn't that she treated everyone badly, just Sandayu. It was late at night, and she was busy drowning her sorrows on alcohol. There was nothing troublesome to guard than a drunk client. Unpredictability always characterized their actions. But with her, one could predict what she'd do next. The extreme version of it would be trying to jump into the water and swim back to her holly place. Sighing, Naruto walked over to her. She was sitting on a wooden chair, beside her bed, staring at nothing in particular. She looked dazed, yet the bottle never missed her mouth. But even a blind man couldn't miss his mouth. You do something repeatedly enough, you started to do it unconsciously. He snatched the bottle from her, earning a glare. He smiled. It wasn't his business to lecture the client. It is only helpful to me if you're sober. My job is to protect you. When you're drunk, it becomes difficult. In a quiet tone he spoke, staring at the woman. Please understand that much. I didn't ask you to protect me. We wouldn't even need this protection if we were not going to the snow. But we are going. Give me my bottle. No. Naruto shook his head. His lips twirled upside down. You look so lonely and miserable. It is kind of sad. But it makes me realize that everyone has their issues. She smiled for the camera and he'd grinned for the villagers. And then when he went home, he'd be all curly on his bed, thinking about the weight on his shoulders and that there was one to relieve him of the pain. When the princess responded with silence, Naruto spoke again. I'll come back again in 10 minutes to check on you. Please be on your bed. I'd hate to have my sensei put you up in bed and compel you to sleep. That mind trick again, Koyuki frowned just thinking about. Why did she even have to be here? There was nothing but pain that awaited her on that side. Sandayu knew this and yet he was forcing the issue. She watched with a stare as Naruto turned away, still holding her bottle. She felt tempted to lunge at him and take it, but she felt weak and honestly had no energy. She didn't even have the energy to get up from the door behind him and then glanced up into the sky. It was cold. There was no solid ground around him. The night moon reflected off his face. Unlike the sun, it permitted a staring contest. Naruto could hear snores of people enjoying their night dreams. Rarely did he enjoy dreams. If the villagers were not cornering him and tossing him into a pillar of fire like a witch, everyone he trusted was turning on him, and in the background, the Kyuubi was laughing gleefully, offering to rescue him, but only if he ceded control of his body. And then there was Orochimaru. He felt his skin crawl just by thinking about the Sannin. Kakashi-sensei. He walked over to the comfortable chair the director uses. It was just sitting on the deck. He settled comfortably and watched as the Jonin appeared from the shadows. You sensed me. The Jonin walked over to Naruto and then leaned against the frame of the ship, his back against the waves hugging their ride. When you have lived around people you think one day will storm into your place and then burn it down, you kind of develop sharp senses. Just to be safe. The tone was a little lifeless. The eyes shone brightly yet a little cold. Perhaps it was the reflection of the moonlight. It was nonetheless an expression Kakashi had seen once or twice from Naruto. Sadly, he replied, it has never been easy. He knew best. He couldn't put it as a question. Anything like that would be displaying an alarming level of ignorance. No, Naruto's lips twitched slightly, but I hope it becomes so. One could only hope. The sad part of it all was that it was the only thing Naruto had. There was no tangible evidence he could hold onto, or even a promise made by someone. He just had to sweat while wrestling with demons, hoping while keeping in mind that it could all be for naught. Kakashi dared not entertain the thought. The cold grip of dread touched his spine when he tried to peer into that future. We all hope so as well. Kakashi didn't muster the kind of confidence and assurance he'd wanted. His thoughts maybe. I spoke to Kurenai-san about your request. I was honestly surprised. You never displayed any interest in genjutsu. It is effective. He frowned. And Sasuke has been using me as target practice. Whenever I have him on a bind, he uses it. Sharingan genjutsu is powerful, but still just illusions. The exposure has made me learn to recognize it quickly. The main problem is not being able to recognize that you're under an illusion. Creative people can fool you easily. You think you can do it? Who knows? My primary objective is to learn its basic structure and how it works. If I manage to work out my chakra control, then maybe I can learn to employ it myself. He paused, adding. Sakura would have been better suited for it. She could provide support while we attack. Only if she was willing. She has to change that. Kakashi replied in a stern tone. You wouldn't have put her under hard training on purpose. Naruto shrugged. I won't help anyone who doesn't want to be helped. If she had any interest in improving herself, she would have stayed. We pushed her to test her resolve. Turned out she didn't have any. Kakashi sighed. That is a problem. Indeed it is. But you're the sensei. It feels like you're telling me to do my job. Naruto smiled sheepishly. Wouldn't dream of it, sensei. It wouldn't be wrong. I've just been watching from the sidelines all the time. I've only ever taught Sasuke. The Jonin shook his head. I'm your sensei, but not really, your sensei. More like a family man who is concerned about keeping the family together. Kakashi chuckled lightly. Maybe right, he said, but I'm failing. The Sandaime has threatened to remove Sakura from the team if she doesn't become a real kunoichi. I would have failed her if that happens. Naruto was surprised the Sandaime would take such drastic decision, but it was rational. She is going to be broken. I don't want that to happen. Kakashi fell silent, staring up into the sky. This is my first team. I don't want to fail any of you. You are anyway right to say Sakura would excel in Genjutsu. I know some. I will try to teach her. You're good, not Kurenai level. She is the greatest Genjutsu user in Konoha. Naruto nodded and then fell silent for a couple of moments before speaking. All help. We have a good team. It can be challenging, but I don't know how things can work out if a new teammate comes in. It's better to stick with what we know. Kakashi nodded and then asked. You want to talk about Orochimaru? Naruto shook his head. I was just a little angry, maybe so much than I would like to admit. Bottling things inside isn't good, he smiled sadly. But I don't really want to talk about it. It is an uncomfortable conversation that brings all sorts of emotions. I understand, but you'll have to eventually deal with it. I know that very well, sensei. Return. Sandaime replied forcefully and then looked at Kakashi. I'm sorry I kept this from you. But I requested you specifically because you already dealt with those people before. What was with these people and putting his team in danger? You should have told us the real reason. We indeed have to protect the princess, but not having any knowledge of who we face puts my team at risk. I understand, but whether you decide to turn away or not, we are still going to take our country back. I have gathered enough people to fight. Kakashi shook his head. Are they shinobi? No. Civilians who are willing to give anything for their country. A good thing but unnecessary. You can't send civilians to fight against shinobi. They will just get killed. Don't do anything. We will deal with it. Kakashi said firmly. He smiled. Even if I ordered the team to sit back and wait for reinforcements, Naruto and Sasuke would not permit it. They have already tasted battle and will say they will be more than enough. They are going to get killed. You should just save your lives and return home. But if you want to die needlessly, do so. A woman who had her hopes crushed. When someone crushes your childhood, you start thinking they were all powerful. For Koyuki, she couldn't tell the difference in power because she was just a civilian. Her mind was scarred by the tragedy of her childhood. She found it impossible to look beyond this mountain. He ignored her words and faced Sandaime. What is it about the crystal? Yes, your uncle then. My father said the crystal was a key to the treasure of the snow. When you spoke about treasure, one was thinking about money, anything of monetary value. I will need that for safekeeping. That is what he wants, not you. The armor was torn off. The shock went in his body. Lightning. He couldn't help but yelp in pain as the jutsu stabbed into his body. He felt like it hit his lungs. No, it didn't it? That was his thought as he began to fall down the ground. Everything turning upside down, his vision becoming blurry. In a thud, he hit the snow. Kakashi landed on one knee, his breathing labored slightly. He closed his Sharingan, quickly put the headband to cover it. Well, you took care of things quickly. Naruto's mysterious tone filled his airwaves. Kakashi turned to the blonde, standing beside him with his hands held together. We had to. I used a little bit of chakra with the Sharingan. You hardly use it. I know it does take a lot from you. But if you don't train yourself to use it, you never get used to it. I mistake reliance with training. Kakashi replied earnestly as he gathered his breath. He then stood up. We don't even know if there are more who will come. And there is still much work to do here. There was no reason to prolong a battle when the client was watching. Besides, he pointed at the armed civilians coming along the way. If they had arrived while he was still standing, there would have been casualties. Naruto finished for his sensei. Yes, I took the best option to avoid that. Naruto nodded. Well, if that is it for the enemy, we can spend the rest of our time in leisure. And I can enjoy that movie part 1 earned for myself. I'm made of hard stuff. I have not survived this hell just to wickedly break down like a little girl. Naruto said firmly. You just stay there rent-free. And when I need you, I will call for your chakra. Powerful chakra. Naruto had tasted it. He had let loose in one of Orochimaru's hideouts after all. Orochimaru hadn't known he could break free from bounds, but the Sannin had quickly held him down by suppressing the Kyuubi's chakra. In cases of need, there was one route to go, and that was using his ace, the vile chakra that would make Konoha tremble if he were to release it. With Jiraiya circling around, he was sure he was going to be forced to work on controlling it. When he arrived at his place, it was all dusty. It was like he'd been gone for years. He sighed. Crappy places. He needed to live at a better place. He was getting paid better, so he could afford to live at a better place. But he was never going to get rid of this apartment. It was held much sentimental value. After all, this had become his safe zone. The last person Kurenai expected to see at her doorstep was Naruto. As far as she was concerned, he was still outside the village on a mission. When she opened her door and found him smiling, she had stood still, momentarily frozen. How did he know where she lived? She looked across the hall, just to see if there was anyone else looking. Once she was satisfied, she glanced back at Naruto. He now had a raised eyebrow. What, you are not supposed to be having your students at your place? Kurenai shook her head. She couldn't say things were different because he was Naruto. You're the last person I expected to see. She said, what are you doing here? Looking for a better place to stay. My apartment is old on the outside. There are many memories and I want to think of something new. Naruto explained lightly. Bad timing. Kurenai blinked. She was standing by the entrance, hands on the door as if she didn't want him to come inside. She shook her head. She opened the door and pushed to the side. Come in. Naruto shook his head. I'll want to stay a little longer. But I found this place by chance. And thought I'd check up on you to see when we can begin with our training sessions. You'll be free. Yes. Come see me tomorrow after 3 p.m. at my training ground. We will see then. I still have my other students to think about. Of course. Kurenai stared at Naruto for a moment. There were many thoughts that just bundled up in her head. With everything the Sandaime has said, it made her want to treat this delicately. You sure you don't want to come in? Oh, I want to come in, but I have other things I need to do. Like I said, I was just passing by. Maybe someday, he said, waving his right hand before turning away from her. Following day. No wonder I felt itchy. Naruto said as soon as he opened his door. Ino was standing there, hands around her waist with a look of impatience. As if she'd been standing there for a couple of hours. Ha ha ha. Ino fake laughed and then stared. Are you going to let me in? Naruto returned the stare. He got along quite nicely with the Yamanaka. He could even go as far as to paint a picture of friendship. Like Shikamaru, Ino expressed understanding. He had already judged her motives. But still, it didn't explain she'd just come to his place like this. For what purpose? He smiled slyly. I didn't think our relationship was like that. Ino rolled her eyes, now folding her hands across her chest. In your dreams, Uzumaki. She replied in a snap. Are you really not going to let me come in? Not unless you state your intentions. I'm being kind here. I could just decide to push you aside. I considered that, Naruto replied in thought. He then released a short breath and opened the door wide. Come on in, Ino-chan. He had his held out, a wide grin on his lips. Ew, that just made me feel a chill down my spine. Now that was uncalled for. Naruto closed the door behind him and stared at Ino's back with an expressionless look. It only lasted for a couple of seconds. You have a decent place, Uzumaki. I expected a mess for someone who lives alone. Well, I don't have anyone to do it for me. Naruto said as he stepped into the kitchen. His kitchen table was littered with scrolls. Ino was staring at them with curiosity. A questioning girl that has always liked digging into personal spaces of others. It didn't help that her father worked in intelligence gathering. Maybe she should have chosen that route instead of trying out the famed Inoshika-cho formation. Maybe it wasn't too late. She still had time. Being a kunoichi didn't seem like it was on the high list of her agenda. You know, if you'd spent this kind of effort while at the academy, you'd have been one of the famous students. Naruto scoffed and responded in a sharp tone. Academy is useless. It didn't even help that some academy teachers were actively trying to sabotage me. The only teacher was good to me was Iruka. If I had been stupid enough without him, I'd have failed. Bitterly, he could thank Orochimaru for kidnapping him and subjecting him to some unspeakable things. It had taught him good lessons. He'd become more alert, and the discovery had forced the Sandaime to give him some personal lessons while also providing him with some scrolls and books to help him learn. If not for that jolt, he would have most likely remained stupid and ignorant, even of the fact of the Kyuubi within him. Naruto's sharp tone caught Ino off guard. She stared at him for a moment and then tentatively sat down. "Sucks being you," she replied, in a quiet tone. Smiling sadly, she added, "Well, at least you have a friend in me. Really, I always thought you came closer just because you were curious." Shikamaru may have left some hints, and Sakura may have said some unflattering slander that you must have found difficult to reconcile, and so you thought to get closer to satisfy yourself. "I won't deny that," Ino smiled. "She is better now, you know. Before, she never spoke anything good about you. Now, she even admits that you even save her life. Miracles happen, I suppose," Naruto said, folding his scrolls. Ino sighed. "You don't have to be like that, you know." Naruto looked at her with a raised brow. "I'm a little busy, as you can see. And I have to meet Kurenai-sensei for my first lesson. Someone is in a cranky mood." Ino paused, staring. She then looked away and staring at the floor with nervousness gripping her tightly. "I won't deny that I became close because I was curious. Besides, we have known each other for a long time, haven't we? You were the kid that saved Sakura from being bullied. She may act ignorant to it, but that is the truth. You've always been a delight. Despite my crush, being around you is a lot more comfortable than being around Sasuke. With him, you know he is never truly looking at you but past you. Besides, he is always brooding. You are the better person. Wish I had a recorder to keep a record of those words." "I'm being serious here." Naruto laughed and then waved his right hand in a dismissive manner. I know, so, now that you're done with the prelude, what is the main subject?" Ino stared back. Naruto wasn't an easy person to deal with. You think you had him figured out, but Ino couldn't really tell his thoughts. He smiled and laughed, but sometimes she wondered if he truly was smiling. He spoke a lot, and yet, there were many things he did not say. Perhaps that was what made him a curious subject to her. On the bonus side of things, he was easy to get along with. And it did always make Sakura mad that she was able to get along with the blonde. "You host the Kyuubi, more or less," she blurted out. But the reaction surprised her. Could she even call it a reaction? Nothing in his face had changed. There was just a slightly raised eyebrow. "I suppose it makes sense that you're the first person to talk to me about this," he replied with a sigh. "Shikamaru, he may have hinted when we were talking about you. How'd that even come? I don't know. Maybe over that I get along with you." "I see." Naruto paused, now staring at his scrolls. "Let me pack up these things and we can walk out. I have to meet Kurenai-sensei. Don't want to be late. Rather be early," he smiled. "Besides, I don't want to miss Kiba. His reactions are always amusing." Ino didn't respond but just watched him wrap the scrolls. But she knew, he wasn't going to meet Kurenai now. The reason they were going to take a walk was because of her statement. He hadn't even said anything about it. Once he was done, he motioned for her to follow him. They stepped out of the apartment and then went to the crowded streets. The atmosphere was always unusual when it came to walking with Naruto. The stairs, she had noticed, and Naruto's flamboyance regarding them. Sometimes when you live in a bubble, such things you cannot even see. It is surprising that despite being my teammate, Sakura does not know yet. She is even ignorant of what surrounds us as we walk along the streets. Admittedly, it is better now. Before, even a blind person would see it. That bad, huh? Ino said with emotion. "I can imagine being in that situation. You don't have to. But like I said, things are different now. It is a little more subtle. But you'd still expect Sakura to notice such things. You hardly along the streets with her. Unnecessary to subject myself to her presence when home. But you're fine with Sasuke." Naruto shrugged. "You know when Sasuke is around, her eyes become narrow. She doesn't look at anything else. And aren't you supposed to be the one to tell?" Naruto shrugged. "There is nothing really to tell. Are you afraid people will hate you?" Naruto glanced at the girl. "Who have you been speaking to? This is rather unusual. I may have overheard Kurenai and Asuma-sensei talking about you." Ino replied with a sheepish smile. "That sounds like you." Naruto smiled while shaking his head. "Not at all. It is just something I would rather not talk about." "Hated? I'm already hated. It doesn't change much." "That isn't very optimistic. But I don't think anyone will hate you. We went to the academy together. We all know you." She paused, smiling a little sadly. Certain things make sense, but aside from Choji, Shika and of course, Sakura, there is no other person I can really call a friend who I could hang out with. I don't want that to change. You came to me just to talk about that. I wanted to confirm about that, Ino replied. Besides, Sakura was saying you use the Shodai Hokage's jutsu. Which is unbelievable. Why did you not tell me about this? I didn't know I should tell things. Well, this other night, I don't know, I was dreaming right, and when I don't want to hear. Ino shouted, but it's really good. I know where you were going with that. Be serious, okay, I suppose I must also tell you that I'm going to be a movie star. Sakura mentioned that in passing, Ino said with nonchalance. How come you use a rare bloodline like that we didn't even know about it? Naruto smiled. Well, maybe now you'll believe me when I say I'm going to be Hokage. Get liked first. Ino shot at Naruto. You just ignored my question. What question, Ino-chan? Naruto had a smile, sly look on his face. Did I mention that I missed you very much while away? It was kind of difficult not having someone who likes you when you get to see Sakura throwing all her love to Sasuke. Ino folded her hands across her chest. Who said I like you? Naruto put a hand on his mouth, wearing a shocked look. I was wrong about you. Actually, stop following me if you don't like me. He then paused, removing his hand from his mouth. A sly smile settled once more. Of course, you were thinking about a different like. I was talking about liking me as a person. What were you thinking about, Ino-chan? He finished in a slow tone, purposefully, his eyes firmly on the blonde. Ino flushed slightly and then shot him a glare. I'm just going to walk away from you. Naruto waved his right hand. Bye-bye, I'm not going to come around you again. Don't say things like that when you just can't resist me. I must truly discover this secret I hold if I was able to make you like me when you had been so infatuated with Konoha's prince. Doesn't take much for anyone to like someone over Sasuke-kun. Ino scoffed. He is handsome, but whoever gets around him and thinks clearly will realize just what kind of a person he is. Naruto laughed. What are you saying about Sakura, then? There is no hope for her. For Kurenai, this was a unique situation. Not long since being baptized into the sensei bath, she was now facing perhaps the most infamous person in the village. To say this was a challenge for any sensei would be an understatement. This was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Maybe it wouldn't be if she looked past that. He was just a child. That much she knew and understood. She wondered though, how would the village even react if it found out about this? She shook her head. Did it matter if they know about this? She was doing this because Naruto had asked and she wanted to pass on her skills on someone else. Maybe she was overthinking things. She releases a long breath. Standing over Naruto was who was sitting under the shade of a tree, hands clapped together and his legs folded. He appeared to be meditating. When those closed eyes flashed open, the clear ocean blue watched her with a bit of iciness that made her curious. Meditating? She asked the obvious. Yes. Naruto nodded. It helps calm my chakra and get a feel of it. It isn't easy trying to gain the precise control needed. I realized some time ago that without proper control I wasted too much chakra. And now with Genjutsu, more is required. I'm told you also have large amounts of chakra reserves. Just how much was something that had left her mouth agape. He was just a kid. A Jinchuriki, but to have as much chakra as Kakashi and the Sandaime clan the blonde had was just ridiculous. Naruto smiled. The blessing of being Uzumaki and a Jinchuriki. It was almost an unfair combination. Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Naruto even knew about the Uzumaki. Kurenai didn't know much either. It was all just history about the once great clan. Well, the Sandaime did warn her to be watchful of what Naruto says and to watch over him after what happened with Orochimaru. A tragedy that he apparently was loath to discuss. She wasn't going to start working the angles about it. She had a job and that was one he requested. If he spoke, then she would not deny him. She settled down across him and then spoke. You said you didn't want to learn how to use it in that way. I honestly don't know how to go about this. Naruto shook his head. Learning all shinobi arts isn't a bad thing. If I can learn genjutsu, I can do so. I primarily use ninjutsu when I fight. But as it has been made obvious to me, genjutsu is also effective. You don't know a single genjutsu. Naruto shook his head. But I know there are different ways in which genjutsu can be used. There is your way, the other with dujutsu like the Sharingan. And there are sound-based genjutsu. I have not found any but I've heard there are. I'll teach you a simple genjutsu and then we can take it from there. I have no problem with that. However, I want to know the basic structure of genjutsu. On me and on the target. What is does to the target and what happens to the chakra flow when I dispel the illusion? Is it just the senses that if affects or as the central nerves? Is that your take when you learn ninjutsu? Naruto smiled. It is something the Sandaime Hokage taught me. I was struggling to work out any Mokuden jutsu in ways that worked out. So, he told me that I have to be able to understand the nature of the jutsu I was using from its structure. He is honestly a genius as he has claimed. The way he understands jutsu and the way he is able to break it down is just amazing. You were trained by the third? No, he just taught me a few things when I was growing frustrated with my lack of progress. Maybe because his frustrations led to a leak of the Kyuubi's chakra. But genuinely, the old man just cared for him and did want to see him progress in his training. Kurenai accepted Naruto's response and then stood up. Let us start. Sakura glanced at Naruto and then at Sasuke, who was busy glaring at Naruto. The blonde was doing his utmost best to ignore him. A week ago, she would have been yelling at him about it. But she now understood she couldn't get in between the relationship between her teammates. Their bond was much greater than she liked to admit. In fact, even those thoughts repulsed her. She was contemptuous to this relationship that just seemed far beyond her no matter how much she struggled to try to claim it. She was going to get better nonetheless. She has no other option. Anything less and she would be kicked out from the team. A heartbreaking scenario that gave her some nightmares. The part of her that she kept closed on a closet wanted nothing more than to blame Kakashi for her near dismissal from the team. He was the one in charge. She was a reflection of his lessons. Do I owe you something? Sakura blinked, feeling that Naruto was actually speaking to her. She'd been staring, she thought mildly. Sasuke was still glaring. She wondered if it was right to respond. After a moment, she shook her head and then answered. No. She frowned deeply. What have you been busy with? I haven't seen you over the past week. Busy. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You wanted to see me. Why do you sound surprised? Well, since you are taking things a bit seriously, I'd imagined that you'd also take an extra step with Sasuke. I mean going after him to help you train. Who knows, you could have bonded. Why hadn't she thought of that? Sakura quickly crushed her thoughts when Naruto's amused look threatened to turn into a laugh. Very funny, she glared. Naruto shrugged. Thought so. He paused, looking at her keenly. You making any improvements? I figure out vacation is going to end very soon. Vacation? Sakura rolled her eyes. I'm still working with Kakashi-sensei on the best way to train. She paused trying to gather her thoughts. Say, Naruto, would you have fought for me if I was to be taken out of the team? Naruto smiled. In such cases, there was one right answer. Lies, of course, but sometimes they work wonders to butter up someone. Still, Naruto disliked feeding Sakura lies. She would not grow. Perhaps he was at times brutally honest with her. Would he have fought for her? A waste of time, irrational even. There was nothing to gain. Sakura was not his best friend. She had attitude problems and could not appreciate his worth. That is an interesting question. He glanced up at Sasuke. What would we have done, Sasuke? Don't drag me into it. Aren't you her teammate as well? Sasuke glared down at Naruto. He wasn't too mad not to notice what the blonde was doing. He would not fall for it. Not this time. Naruto didn't want to answer. He wanted him to give an answer knowing that he wasn't going to lie. But in this case, anything brutal from him might kill the girl's spirits and she might even become more of a burden. Or maybe not, she could be more motivated to prove them wrong. In any case, whatever happens, Naruto wouldn't complain. And it wouldn't have been his fault. Now, that isn't a nice look to a teammate, Sasu-chan. Sasuke didn't reply. Naruto faced Sakura. Tell me, for what reason would I fight for you? We are teammates. Naruto stared at her and then laughed. Stop joking, Sakura. When have you ever treated me like a teammate? Besides, what good are you in a team? Kakashi appeared in a puff of smoke to stop any farther talk. I see you are all here, the Jonin said with an eye smile. We going back to missions? Kakashi shook his head. An invite came from Iwagakure for participating in the Chunin exams. Konoha has intentions to send teams to the nation. But nobody is forced to go unless it is a mission. If you participate and do well, you can be promoted to Chunin. If you are interested, we can go there. Predictably, Naruto was the first to respond. And Sasuke supported his motion. There is no need to even ask. Sensei, I think we are ready to become Chunin. Maybe we will do better missions. The glaring question was Sakura. But Naruto wasn't going to say a damn word about it. Nothing was going to ruin this chance. It would be good to test ourselves against others from other villages. Sasuke failed to contain his grin. Sakura was going to take whatever her teammates decided. She basically followed the direction of the wind in such situations. Kakashi sighed with disappointment, not at her but himself for allowing this to continue. It wasn't like he didn't see anything. He just thought she would grow on her own, like her teammates. But there was nothing motivating her. I thought you'd say this. We have a couple of days to prepare. Well, I'm always ready. Naruto said as he stood up. I should hope you take this seriously. It would be laughable if I come back with a promotion and you return with failure. Sasuke responded by jumping from the tree. He landed on front of the blonde, a hard glare on his eyes. Naruto could feel the hot breath from the Uchiha. The Sharingan flashed for a second and Naruto smiled. Oh dear, someone is very serious. I suppose it is on. May the better shinobi win, Sasu-chan. Better shinobi? Sasuke scoffed. I've always been the better shinobi. Whatever strokes our pride. Naruto glanced at Kakashi through the corner of his eyes. In these days, you're going to help us prepare, right? If so, must we prepare weapons for training? Or will we be focused on something specific? Kakashi shook his head. We will cover all the basics. I want you to be fully prepared. The exams are a showcase for future generation talent. We can only afford to represent Konoha well. I see. Naruto responded. We start tomorrow then. Yes. Be here by 8 a.m. I'll be around by 6, Naruto replied as he started to walk away. But Kakashi stopped him. The Jonin requested to speak to him privately. Naruto nodded and the Jonin took him up to the Hokage monument. The air was fresh as always. It was always a pleasant feeling, overlooking the tiny people walking along the village streets. Naruto took in the air for a couple of moments before glancing at the Jonin standing on his right side. You already know there is a problem with Orochimaru. The village has resolved it wants to get rid of him. He has shown interest in both you and Sasuke. There is no doubt that he might try to take you again. One of the reasons the village has decided he needs to be dealt with. Kakashi spoke in a hardened tone. They were talking about Orochimaru, so it was understandable that the Jonin could speak about getting rid of him so simply as if it would be like batting a fly. So if we leave for the mission, there are chances he might make a move. Yes, Naruto disliked this kind of living. Konoha was safe but he couldn't be confined in this place. He would go insane if that happened. So what happens now? You just have to know that anything can happen. We will have a squad of Anbu tailing us just in case. Jiraiya-sama will also be on standby. Naruto smiled. Bait, something like that. Well, if it gets Orochimaru crippled, I can't complain. Naruto responded in a quiet tone. One more thing, Kakashi said. Iwa must not know you are a Jinchuriki. A Jinchuriki who uses Mokuton will unnerve many people and create problems. They'll be more worried if I do too well without revealing the power and they later learn I'm a Jinchuriki. And I intend to decimate all my opponents. He paused. Is Sakura going? She isn't capable to chase after promotion. She is, but I could get someone else if you don't want her. She isn't the least ready. People die in the Chunin exams. Taking her with you means taking a burden. Naruto smiled. Well, better. If we leave her behind, she is never coming back into the team. But if we take her with us, it will be brutal. She will suffer. There is no better teacher than experience. We've always shielded her. It will be best if we let her suffer a little. Get her to that situation where she is at a corner and neither Sasuke or I are there to save her. Once she experiences this, I tell you, she will repent. If not, prepare a report to send her back to the academy. A collapsed building, destroyed with just debris flying before her. Tsunade released a long breath and then stared down at the two shinobi lying, dead before her. They'd suddenly attacked, setting off an explosion that would have been dangerous had she been completely out of it. If they had been smart enough, they could have waited. For the moment she could do nothing but just roll over with her brain intoxicated by alcohol, depending on Shizune for security. The shinobi were just simple rogue things. But more danger was about to come. If Hiruzen was serious, he would send his shinobi. Or maybe even Jiraiya, but the fact that she was in this situation just meant that she was already in the bingo book. A rogue shinobi, she'd been marked. It was ridiculous. Something had happened to her sensei. Old age hadn't made him take the necessary decisions. Timid and naive, that was what his old age brought out in him. Not this. More shinobi are going to show up, Shizune said, undeniably. Nobody was going to miss out on the millions on her head. Even when they knew she was powerful, they'd not stop taking chances. We will have to be always on the lookout. Can't sleep with both eyes opened. Konoha doesn't have to do anything. We are going to be hunted wherever we go. What do we do? What do you think? Tsunade snapped, unintentionally. It was just frustrating that she had to be forced into this situation. Boom. What now? It was a smoke bomb. Shizune was on alert as the smoke filled through her, blinding her. There was no time to do anything. Firm hands grabbed her and pulled her from the smoke. Tsunade-sama. Tsunade twisted around. Atop of a building, masked men were holding Shizune hostage. Their masks. She recognized them. You're Anbu from Konoha. What do you want? Shizune has been ordered back to Konoha by the Hokage. We are to return with her immediately. The Sandaime Hokage expresses hope that you'll also return home, soon. If not, Hunter Nin will be activated. As if I'm afraid of Hunter Nin. You're far too powerful for Hunter Nin. Bounty hunters won't care, though. They just want money. For Konoha Hunter Nin, the mission won't be to fight you head-on, but just to make you uncomfortable. Just when you attempt to sleep, they might strike. Or when you're busy fighting other who give you a challenge, they might strike. The Sandaime hopes you stay sober, Tsunade-sama. And just like that, the Anbu vanished along with Tsunade. Damn it, Tsunade shouted angrily, stomping on the ground. No matter how you looked at it, this was just devious. Having Jiraiya come at her seemed like it would be the last option. But for now, that damn old man seemed content to make her uncomfortable enough to return to Konoha on her own without being dragged kicking and screaming. She hated this. After everything she has done for the Leaf, this was how her sensei was going to thank her.